Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, March 20th, 2023. Call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. At this moment, we're going to go into a joint meeting with the school board, which all members of the school board are present with the exception of school board member Gale. At this time, Superintendent Ray, Chair Preble, anything to bring forward to the city?
So good evening, everybody. This part of it will be very short, as the majority of our conversation will be during action items, the presentation of the school budget. Just to give everybody a brief update on all things building project, because we know that that is something that we're all very concerned about, is that we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago at Saco Middle School to talk about the site. We are hoping, because there's still a lot of work to do, to have our site application turned into the Department of Education on April 11th, which allows them to schedule us for the State Board of Education site approval, which in the month of May, which would be, that's one of the big milestones that we have is site approval, then followed by concept approval, which will be closer to the end of the summer. Once site approval has been done, at the state board, I would say that then within the next couple of months, you'll get to start looking at that real visual of what a floor plan will begin to start looking like, and that's when some excitement will start to build about certain pieces and the reasons why one classroom might be in one location of the building and why another. But that is a process that we're working through now, continuing to meet with the Department of Education on a weekly to bi-weekly basis, just to update, so you think about the amount of space, the amount of square footage, as you're trying to negotiate those items with the DOE to come to something that would work for us. So I really am hopeful that we will meet that deadline. We're trying to be aggressive to get on to the May State Board meeting instead of the June meeting, and a lot is contingent on property, site, and all items that we are currently working on. Oak Point is, we have a meeting tomorrow with a pre-scope meeting with the Department of Transportation to talk about filing for that permit. So all of those things are moving forward in quite a fashion.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you. I have two things I want to mention at this meeting. First, as I've been thinking about these joint meetings with the school board, I think it might be helpful if we set some agenda items in advance in the future, maybe solicit input from the school board and or the council about things we want to discuss together, and that could help guide some discussion. So I'm wondering if that could be a procedure in the future. And second, I think much of the council got an email from a member of the public with some concerns or questions about Thornton Academy, the contract between Saco Schools, Thornton Academy, its renewal, and particularly where it involves IEPs. And what dawned on me in reading this email is that I'm fairly ignorant as to the process. And I'm wondering if either here or at a future meeting, I could be educated as to where we are in our contract with Thornton Academy, when it comes up for renewal, what the process is, who's involved, and what the respective role of the school board versus the council is, so that we can be prepared for when those things happen.
Next year is the contract, is when the contract is up. There have been no discussions, and talking to City Solicitor Tim Murphy, in the past, the mayor nor the council has had any involvement in that. That is solely between the school department, the school superintendent, the school board chair, and Thornton Academy.
Thank you.
And Mike, I was not on that email, so I don't know what that's about on that piece. And Kevin, just correct me if I'm wrong. The last contract that you did, it follows a slightly different process because of the withdrawal from the RSU.
That's correct. I was not around I was not around on the school board when the prior contract, I think Beth might recall what was done at that time, but the withdrawal agreement that the Thorn Academy agreement that we have now was put together by by the withdrawal committee, and all of the parameters around timelines and things like that were set by the withdrawal process. But it was definitely a different process than what is normally gone through.
And Jeremy, we can forward you that email from that community member. Any further discussion? Any agenda items that we want to bring up? Really, remember, this is, we've put this in the charter that the board, the school board and the city council meet for the purposes of budget transmission, and that is what is happening tonight. That's why the agenda was fairly short in comparison to when we've had other meetings with long agendas. So if there's nothing else, we will move right into the city council agenda, and then we'll talk about more about school budget under action item A. With no objection, moving on, I'd like to invite everybody to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Under general this evening, we have a very special recognition, and that is item A, to recognize Eagle Scout Sagan Garrett. Proclamation honoring Sagan Garrett, Eagle Scout. Whereas the Boy Scouts of America has a history of more than 100 years of helping to shape and mold the values and character of youth. Whereas the Boy Scouts of America continues to help strengthen youth, families, and communities. Whereas the Boy Scouts of America encourages its adult and youth members to live in a worldwide principles of organization, including duty to God and respect for individual beliefs, loyalty to one's country and respect for its laws, strength of world friendship and scouting brotherhood, service to others, community development, and universal regard for the Scout promise and law as a life guide. Whereas a ceremony of honor was held to celebrate Sagan Garrett, Boy Scout Troop 310, for attaining the rank of Eagle Scout. Whereas for his Eagle Scout project, Sagan made owl nesting boxes to donate to local conservation organizations. In recognition of his achievement, now therefore I, William Doyle, Mayor of Saco, do hereby express my best wishes and congratulations to Sagan Garrett as he embarks on new adventures in the days ahead, given under my hand, seal of the City of Saco, this 20th day of March, 2023.
Thank you. I appreciate the certificate. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my Eagle project. It was a little bit of a process because I was one of probably a third or fourth since I joined the troop that did an Eagle project, and I wanted to kind of shoot big compared to what some of the other scouts did. So one of my goals was to do kind of a more challenging woodworking project, and I kind of got that with the owl boxes. I think we had a router involved and a jigsaw, and that's kind of a challenge for the scouts because we all kind of have a basic woodworking skill. So that was probably a key part of it for me. I made 9 boxes in total. I gave 3 to Center for Wildlife, a owl sanctuary. I gave 3 to the Maine State Forest Service on Swan Island, and I gave 3 to Saco Bay Trails, and those are down in the Saco Old Orchard area that are local, and you can go see them. I think they're a little bit tucked into the woods, but I'm glad to have some of those in Saco. So I just wanted to say thank you for recognizing me. Any questions about the project?
Councilor Hatch.
Just a quick congratulations. It's a lot of hard work, so more power to you, and carry those values with you moving forward. You'll be a good American. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No further questions. Thank you very much, and again, congratulations. At this time, moving on to item 5 of the agenda, committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence this evening? Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Little lengthy one tonight. We've got 3 different ones that I'm honored and blessed to announce for the weekend. First off, Friday night, I attended the kickoff of the Saco School Art Show, Repurposed, at the Saco Museum. This is an art display from Saco School kids from grades K through 8. The artwork is all made and designed by using recycled or repurposed items. The opening night hosted over 150 parents, students, and residents. The display is running through April 28th at the museum. Admission is free, and I encourage anyone to stop by and support and to see the display. It's absolutely amazing. Great job to all the kids, the students, and the volunteers and workers at the museum who stapled everything up. But no, it definitely is an amazing exhibition to go and see. And then on Saturday night, Saco Park and Rec Seniority Program and Age-Friendly Saco hosted a St. Patrick's Day dinner and dance at the community center. We had over 100 people from Saco, Old Orchard, and Biddeford participate. We had a corned beef dinner provided by the Golden Rooster. Cupcakes were provided by Riley's Bakery, and the Saco River Jazz Band was on hand to provide the music. Again, wonderful community effort by both groups volunteering. And then lastly, on the economic development front, we are welcoming 2 businesses to the area. This past month, we had Chipotle open, and on Saturday night, Boomer's Restaurant, which was the former Kerryman Pub, they hosted a soft opening. I had an opportunity to talk with co-owner Mike Simpson, and they are so excited to be here. They're hoping to follow in the traditions of the Kerryman Pub. They understand the impact that they had over the last 40-plus years to the residents of Saco. They donated 35 pizzas, I believe, to Mary's Walk on Saturday, and they are anticipating their grand opening for this weekend. So again, I encourage everybody to stop by, say hello. And we were sitting there, and it just, within probably about a half an hour, it had that vibe again of the former Kerryman Pub for people that remember what a community place it was.
Thank you very much. Any further committee correspondence at this time? Moving on to item 6 of the agenda, that is public comment. The only person that's signed up for public comment at this time is Kelly Archer. Again, for anyone coming up to speak to the City Council or the School Board, please speak directly into the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street. Would Councilor HPC Liaison Mr. Hatch please remove 8E, Mayor's Appointment Matthew Ellis to the HPC from the consent agenda for placement on action items for discussion. As some of you may recall, years ago, there were many HPC discrepancies and conversations as to the terms of members, regular versus associate members, meeting quorums, term expirations, and voting after an expired term. At that time, it was determined to begin anew with 5 of those members then and their 3-year terms to end on June 30th, 23, with the understanding that all incoming appointments be staggered by the date of council approval, unless such appointment was to fulfill a vacancy's term, thereby cleaning up the previous issues and to not have multiple members expiring on the same day. At present, the HPC has 5 of its 6 members out of a possible 10 members expiring at the end of June. Tonight, you will have accomplished 5 regular members by confirming Associate Member Matthew Ellis to a voting regular member. Please change the June 30th, 2023 date to March 20th, 2023. Thereby, only 4 members will be expiring by the end of June. Councilors, this quasi-judicial HPC still struggles for 3 years to meet quorum and desperately needs 4 more associate members, vacancies, to be appointed. Please help by your chartered duties to fulfill these vacancies as soon as possible. Please contact the city clerk, who impeccably performs her duties, and request a copy of the pending board applications for your review and possible consideration for appointments. And for your information, in an October 18th, 2017 application, architect Sam Funari wanted to be appointed to the HPC. My question, why is it taking so long to appoint him as well as many others? For example, I am also extremely concerned with why 2 highly qualified appointment applications on record, Chloe Finnegan's in September 2022 and Stuart Johnson's in November 2022, has taken several months to be added to tonight's consent agenda of their appointment to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for confirmation. To the mayor, councilors, and city administrator, for the past 3 years, I have been advocating for live streaming within the chambers, a public comment section on every board's agenda, and for all public hearings, subsequent communications to be included under the More tab of the city website prior to the public hearing. Citizens do have a right to know. Mr. Mayor, your November 2019 mayoral platform, on record with the Portland Press Herald, Biddeford Saco Courier, your Facebook page, and other social media, was to increase transparency in the process through civic engagement, to provide proactive leadership in our community, and to live stream other committees' meetings. Only one HPC meeting, November of 2022, held in these chambers, has been live streamed. Why is the planning board not being streamed? Why do we remain a losing community when it comes to access and good archive records? Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's anybody else who would like to address the city council, please come forward and be heard. With nobody seeking recognition, moving on to item 7 of the agenda, and that is the approval of minutes for March 6, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Berman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on approving the minutes for March 6, 2023? Roll call votes. School Board Member Archer?
Aye.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
City
I picked up on it.
Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to approve the minutes. That brings us to item 8, the consent agenda item for this evening. There are several items, and that is item A, application for a solid waste permit for Casella Waste Systems. Item B, confirm mayor's appointments to Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee of Chloe Finnegan and Stuart Johnson. Item C, confirm mayor's reappointments to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for Robert Hamlin and Christopher Nucci. Item D, confirm mayor's reappointments to the Conservation Commission of Melissa Fields and Matthew Hokinson. And item E, confirm mayor's appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission for Matthew Ellis. Is there any council that wants to remove an item? Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I'd like to remove item E for the purposes of changing the dates.
Thank you. If there's no other request to remove anything, is there a motion to approve consent agenda items A through D?
So moved.
Councilor Berman, is there a second?
Second.
Councilor McPhail, any discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item 9 this evening is action items, and what was item A is now item B, because item A is to confirm the mayor's appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission for Matthew Ellis. Counselor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. The Historic Preservation Commission is comprised of members being appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council for 3-year terms. Each appointed committee member shall be a resident of the city, serve without compensation, and must meet the qualifications outlined in Section 4-34 of the city's administrative code. Mayor Doyle has recommended Matthew Ellis, Ward 2, be promoted from associate member to regular member on the Historic Preservation Commission with a 3-year term expiring on June 30th, 2023. I'm going to change the date in the motion, and I'm going to make the motion to be it ordered that the City Council confirm the mayor's promotion of Matthew Ellis from associate member to regular member on the Historic Preservation Commission for a term that would expire on June 30th, 2026.
Counselor Hatch, one thing I would caution before we get to this, these item commentaries are set up by city staff following the rules. I'm not aware if this is somebody that's being promoted to fill a vacancy in a current seat, and what I'd want to know from the city clerk is more information related to changing that date.
Right.
So
I appreciate that clarification.
Item commentary is set that way for a reason designed by staff.
All right. If it is incorrect, then we could bring it back to another meeting?
You could table this item and bring it back to another meeting
Just to
with,
be sure.
given the ability for further question,
All right.
further examination.
Then let me amend my motion to table this appointment until we can clarify the dates.
Second.
Motion to table. Excuse me. In the point of order, we haven't brought the item to the floor, so we no longer need to table it. We need to bring it to the floor with a first and a second, then it's on the floor, then you can table. So if you can read it into the record as proposed, and we'll see if there's a second for the item or if it dies for lack of a second.
That'll be fine. So be it ordered that the City Council confirm the mayor's promotion of Matthew Ellis from associate member to regular member on the Historic Preservation Commission for a term that would expire on June 30th, 2023. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Councilor Archer.
Yes, for discussion. I just would like a little bit more information. Because this is an appointment, do we even have the authority to amend dates on an appointment? That's the one part my brain, I don't even know if we have the ability to do that because it is an appointment and it's a term. So I definitely, sounds like we're going to a table, but those are my questions that I have is do we even have the ability to change appointment terms on the floor as as an amendment to a mayor's appointed motion.
That is why I suggested what I suggested, because these are set by city staff, dependent on the terms in the charter and ordinance. So with that, Councilor Gunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think under the circumstances, to your point, since the terms are set, and to the member of the public's point, though, it has been difficult to fill vacancies, even though the terms continue to tick along. Their terms don't just remain static, even if the offices are vacant. And we sometimes get into situations like this. For example, that planning board vacancy only has a year to go on it, though, and this one only has about 3 months. But that being said, I think it would be appropriate, and for quorum purposes, for our friends down at the Historic Preservation Commission to approve this, and then I would, after the fact, ask the city administrator to look into the situation that's been brought to our attention. If there is any discrepancies in how the terms are, we can deal with that later. But I don't see it, upending the apple cart if we promote Ellis up to regular member, but then simply task the city administrator with looking into the matter further. I think that would be the most prudent action at this point.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? You have a first, you have a second. With no further discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman? Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to what was item A, now item B, and that is a school department budget presentation. You should have all received a packet at the dais, and there's also packets in the back of the room by the sign-in sheet. And now I'll turn it over to Superintendent Wright.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Again, this is an opportunity for us to present the first draft of the FY24 school department budget. Just kind of starting at as an overview, the governor in the Department of Education has added additional funding this year into GPA to try to keep schools funded at 55%. However, as we talk about that piece, it's important to realize that if you think of educational funding like a pie, and that there's a sliver of 55% statewide, not necessarily locally, that is funded by the state, each year the cost of education tends to increase statewide. Thus, that pie now is a bigger pie, and still 55%, which means that both the local side of that and the state side grow. And so one of the items that we've been talking about from kind of the superintendency level is that 2004 is when Maine voters voted in 55%, and it took until last year to fund 55%. And so that maybe our conversation really should be, is 55% the right number? It took us so long to get there. Things definitely have changed since 2004 as we look at school funding, mill rates, valuations, state population, et cetera, student needs. And so as we think about that pie, and we think about state funding, you guys know that through our discussions that the school funding formula is really made up of two different components. Student counts, and then some of the demographics of student counts and teacher ratios, and then property valuation. And as you can see on this slide, the state, when they put together their ED 279, which is the form that we're going to go through in just a little bit, they look at a 3-year average of property valuation. And for 2024, the city of Saco is worth approximately, in the state eyes, on a 3-year average, $2.77 billion, which is an increase over the prior 3-year average of almost $182 million, or 7%. Now, the bad news in that figure is that the valuation of the state only increased on average 6%. So anytime your local valuation is increasing more than state valuation, you begin to have a problem immediately. Because they're shifting and saying that locally, you should be able to raise more taxes based off your valuation or pay more for education. As we look forward, I found this slide to be very, very interesting. And it's the conversation about, will Saco valuation growth outpace the state in the future? And so one of the pieces I found extremely interesting is that when you look at 2020 and you look at 2023, Saco's valuation grew by about a little over $500 million, or 20% over that period of time. Now, what's a little bit interesting in this entire piece, when you look at all of the towns in York County, is that 20% is a little bit on the lower end. That could be that either we have some catch-up, revals need to be done, could be a whole lot of reasons for that. However, 20% increase in 3 years of your entire town is still fairly significant, which means that we begin to look at some of the problems or challenges that we face that's a little bit different than others, is that we know that York and Cumberland counties' home prices grew significantly over the last 3 years. Much like small, rural, coastal towns did the same thing. So as we talk with superintendents and we look at some of the things happening across the state, it's weird to think that sometimes Southern Maine's best allies may be the small regional coastal towns that have had the same thing happen to them, where their valuations and their home sale prices have increased dramatically. And I think that we're all aware of what home sale prices and valuations look like in Saco right now, just by looking at the real estate guides and seeing what's on the market and what comes up as being a real challenge. So I think it's safe to assume that we must continue to pay attention, advocate, and look at having half of your factor be on valuation. Because we're going to continue to rise, which means less money is going to be available for schools. So now I want to take you to the formula. How do we get to the amount of money that the state gives us? And on the next slide, we get a printout every year that comes to us in the end of January. And there are many different components of this formula. And so I'm going to walk through the 4 or 5 pages here and kind of give you the highlights of what we pay attention to. So the first box on your screen, kind of at the top right, is your pre-K through 8 student counts. So as a pre-K through 8 district that tuitions their students 9 through 12 to high school, we are always focused on every October making sure that our student counts are there. And you can see that our student counts for October 22, pre-K through 8, were 1886. And you can look at the year before and you can say, well, wow, that's a lot of growth. 2 things happened. One, we had our new neighbors move into the hotel. And number 2, we had students who were returning from kind of homeschools year in the past, we've seen some numbers of students return who may have homeschooled during the COVID situation. But a lot of that is just new neighbors. They average that over 2 years, hopefully to ease spikes and valleys that can happen in communities. And they use that number to fill into the formulas for ratios of student to teachers. Now, this is a situation where there was a change this year by the department from the last ED 279 the year before. During the last 2 EDs, the last 2 funding cycles, we were under emergency orders, so the DOE had some flexibility in how they changed certain factors in the formula. And because we are out of that emergency order, they have to go back to what's in statute. So it's ratios of students of 17 to 1. And what you can look at is when you look at teachers, guidance, librarian, health, ed tech, school admin, when they look at the number of staff we have in our schools and then divide that over the number of students, you receive a factor. And when it says factor, it's 0.82. Now remember that EPS is essential programs and services. This model was built on the thought that this is the floor, where you should be. However, I think over time, a lot of times communities saw that as the ceiling. What they do with those factors is that every individual who works in the school department is assigned a salary figure. So if Nathan's teacher first year, no master's degree. In a matrix, there's a salary figured attached to Nathan. And then Jody, let's say Jody's a 15-year teacher with a master's degree. She's assigned a different salary number. The next biggest change in the funding formula for this year is that the matrix is now reflective of the base $40,000 minimum teacher salary. So in the past, when Nathan was step one, first-year teacher, he was assigned a matrix number of 33,000. That's been up to 40,000, and everybody else slid with that. So what they do is they go through all of the teachers in our school district. That comes up to the $7.8 million that you'll see, and then they multiply that by 0.82. And you begin to build subsidy coming down the front page. And that's done for every position. The third box on that is your benefits. That's another area that they changed this year, that they'd say that 26% of teachers, guidance counselors, librarians, and health occupations, they'd use their salary figure times 26%. That changed from 19% the year before, so they've adjusted that for the increases. The fourth box down is your regional adjustment. What this states, and this is always an item that is talked about a lot across the state by superintendents, is they've assigned all of that money at the top that we're continuing to add down through, and they're saying, you live in a region of the state that's more expensive than the others. So they multiply that by 1.09 to get a regional adjustment factor. Reason that is highly controversial is that some of us who live in southern Maine may argue that it should be more. Some of the superintendents who are in Washington County actually have a negative factor. So they would just be hoping to get to 1. So if you're the superintendent in East Machias, I believe their factor is like 0.84, so they get all of that matrix built up and then lose money. So that's always a hot issue. Just prior to COVID, we were starting to have those discussions across the state, and then that kind of has slowed down. And I suspect will be revisited as there's some bills in there to look at the funding formula in total. And I know that regional index will be part of that. All of those numbers on the front page add up to the EPS student rate. So ideally, what you're hoping for in this is the higher the number on the front page, the better it's going to be for our subsidy. As we move to page 2, this is where weighted counts come into play. On the top of the page, they take your enrollments over the past couple of years, add your tuition students at the high school level together to come up with a subsidizable pupil count. Now, using that subsidizable pupil count, you can see that the math is used from the number on the front page. So with the 118 pre-K students, that's multiplied by $8,155 to come up with a number. Where things start to get interesting a little bit is when you look at C, your weighted counts. You'll see that for disadvantaged rate, these are students that's free and reduced lunch, we are right now at approximately 25%. Now, what's a little interesting about this number is I would, one, say that number is artificially low, and the reason for part of the reason for that is as we've made the switch to all students pre-K through 8 that have a free lunch at school, the incentive of returning the forms to school has definitely gone down. And that's something that I was actually, even at 3 o'clock today, we were on a call about that, because that's, everybody across the state is experiencing that same challenge. But that number is now converted into a number of students in your district and given an extra 15% factor. Now, the extra 15%, this was another change that was made in the formula, where that number during the COVID years was at 20%. So a quarter of that funding there was kind of pulled back in order to shift some of that money to the front page. Certainly something that, as superintendents, we worry about a little bit. The second piece that you can see is our ELL students, and you'll see them in kind of the middle red box, and that's the number of students that we currently have in our district. And as you know, that is significantly more than prior years past. What you can see is that you do get an additional half a weight for ELL students in the funding formula. And as you can see, as those funds start to add up. As you go through this page, this is the next page where the higher the number at the bottom, the better you're going to be, because this becomes your operating allocation that is added to all of the expenditure-driven components on page 4 of the ED 279. So on page 3, you have items like gifted and talented, special education, high cost out of district, transportation, and approved bus purchases. You also have teacher retirement amount in B. All of those numbers are added to the final number on page 2, plus your debt service, and in this situation, insured value factor at 6% is treated like an additional payment for state debt. We also receive $81,000 back for applying to get $8 a square foot for Toddle Inn. It's important to remember that we're on year 3 of receiving that $81,000, and you can only receive that for 5 years. So in 5 years, we'll have made some decisions by that time on that lease and what we're doing in the future, but that is part of the state process. Is lease space is only good for subsidizable reimbursement for a 5-year period. As you continue to add up those numbers, you've now looked at combined operating and other subsidizable costs. Those numbers are transferred to page 4, and this is where your valuation kicks in. And it says that you take your $37 million, you look at the value of your community in the middle of the page, and the state sets a mill expectation of how many mills you must raise in order to get the money that they would say that they're giving you. So when you take the valuation, multiply it by the mills, you come up with just over $20 million. And they're saying, you must raise that for education. We subtract it from the number above, and that's what your subsidy is for pre-K through 12, which is $17,186,556.49. That is your subsidy. Additionally, you are part of a regional service center, and so they have a dollar per student on page 5 that they give you, and you pick up another $118,000 of being part of that regional service center or educational service center. When you look at the bottom of that page, you have state share versus local share. And in this situation, your state share is now 45.95%, locally paying 54.05%. That is a reduction from last year by almost 4% in state share. I want to take questions on that part, because that, I'll stop at that piece and just see if there's any questions based off the printout, the funding formula, anything that you'd like to know that I could help with.
Any questions for Superintendent Ray? Council Archer?
I just want to say, I said this last year, you presented it pretty much identically, I feel like, except the numbers changed, obviously.
Correct.
It was very helpful last year, and again, this kept it on target. The 17 million, wish it was higher, but, I mean, that's what it is right now. But the governor can change that and amend it, correct?
So, so that would be through appropriations.
Yes.
That would happen. Now, let's talk about that 17 number. That 17 number is $260,000 less than you received last year. Problem that becomes with when you receive $260,000 less than the year before, you need to make that up, while we know that everything else has increased as well. So we're starting in the hole. What I'd like to share with you next, unless there's any other questions about the formula piece, is just taking a glimpse of other municipalities in southern Maine and the per pupil expenditures. And one of the things that we talked about on the at the school committee meeting is that it's a little bit tougher for Saco to compare apples to apples in anything other than the total. And part of that reason is because when you look at the first thing like regular instruction, you'll see that Saco School Department is way higher than a lot of the others. And that is because tuition payments are part of regular instruction, whereas we know that in a tuition payment, things like administration, stipends, all of those are now sitting at Thornton Academy that they have to kind of take from that sum of money. That's a little bit of a difference for us in this situation. And that then your other pieces are only factored through a pre-K through 9 situation. So at the end of the day, what's more important in looking at where Saco spends locally or statewide, it's really the end number, because not a lot is there because of our interesting setup. What you can see is that locally, looking at southern Maine communities that are listed on this page, we're right around average. And we're slightly above state average in funding for education. More, this is just things to read and go through, and I can answer any questions later on that piece. But then we go to the budget, and we look at our budget and we say, okay, what's at the end of the day, what's driving the costs in your budget if you're looking at an increase? And one of the things that is apparent, not only here, but in basically every community that's putting out a budget right now, is that while the Department of Education put approximately $100 million more into the 55%, that only represented about a 3.25% increase of their funding statewide. That was like 3.25% increase. Well, there's not a lot of things that are out there right now that are only going up 3.25%. And so as you look at the cost drivers in our budget, it's fairly simple in this situation, that it's salaries and benefits and tuition. In this budget, we currently have 2.5 positions more than we had last year. And the only reason that they're the 2.5 positions more is that we are actually funding them right now, as we needed to hire ELL teachers when our new neighbors moved in. We needed to make the adjustment in the budget and look at that. And so the only difference is having those 2.5 positions, 2 at the K through 8 and a half at Thornton Academy. We are projecting the same number of students at Thornton Academy at 890 as we did last year, knowing that 23 of those students currently are new neighbor students, and there's every indication that that program will continue at the hotel for another year based off everything that I'm hearing. And so I think it's wise that, we continue to budget for those costs. That only puts us at a buffer of about 2%, 20 students, as we move into next year. And we have budgeted a 5% increase in MAT. I'd have to say that I'm a bit nervous that that's a little bit low, because our increase this year was 6.7%. And as I was going through some of the factors, one of the factors that they use is a 2-year inflation number, which was 3.99%, adds into that. Looks like in the last several months, the last couple months I've been watching, or I heard on the news the other day, the inflation was a little bit lower the last month, or it's been trending downward. But that's something to watch, of whether we're comfortable with that 5% piece. The other piece that I think that when we worked with Catholic Charities and the state around students at the hotel, they were really, after we kind of locked in enrollments for the year, they really worked with us to, as families moved into permanent housing, only replace with families during the school year that didn't have children, because they knew of the challenges that presented in classroom size and et cetera. They did say that as we moved into the summer that, you'll kind of reboot, and we could get a very new population of students, a different population of students. But I'm hoping that that relationship will stay the same, in that once we kind of get into the school year, we look at having some, stable numbers of children, because that's just, whether it's bus routes or class size, it's very important. One of the things that we've also looked at in this budget is there's like a $10,000 increase in a piece of software we're looking to purchase that will help us alert if there was a school safety situation, and push that out to all staff members and to our public emergency systems. We know that when we had our kind of dry run in the fall with a neighboring community, that communication and getting that word out fast enough was something that was challenging, and looking at how we push something to people's phones. I've decreased capital expenditures by $500,000 based off the fact that you guys graciously funded all of the new furniture and painting. That is going to be completed. And we are on pace, looking at existing capital budgets and what's in there, to have our roof completed at the middle school. Will be done, other than maybe a small section by the end of the summer. And the reason that one small section maybe would be saved is that we're working with the engineers right now, because we were successful. Last year I explained to you some of the revolving renovations for air quality. And we're looking at finishing the roof and also adding new ventilation on the top that won't come until November because of back orders. And we're trying to determine whether we want to build up now so that those units can just sit there and not repuncture the roof, or hold a small section until that's done and then finish it the next summer, because we don't want to disturb a new section of roof for new ventilation. Another piece that we've looked at is, and still having in the budget, a good amount of money for capital improvements to continue to chip away at all things middle school as we look towards the new building, so that when we come out, that we can say, hey, look at all the improvements we had here. here's a new building, what's a real plan, we can get into place of the city. We have also added into this budget field trip amounts of $60,000. And part of that is about really making sure that equity and home economics aren't preventing kiddos from being able to go on a field trip. I think that's a challenge that we all face in schools. And when you look at those things, you don't want someone's ability to pay to not allow your kids to go to ecology school, even though that's free, or some other type of event. So really trying to minimize that. We also, on a positive, you will see 6 state-approved school replacement lease purchases for buses. We qualified 6 of our buses to get funding from the DOE. You won't see a big increase in the transportation line because of the fact you have some payments going off the books, but now we've got 6 more buses that will be supported with state dollars. So at the end of all of those pieces, and knowing that we still have to think about our new neighbors, our relationships with opening new schools, and/or how that relates to positions, out-of-district placement cost, fuel costs. As part of this budget, we had prepared the budget, and I try to lock in the numbers until we get to this point and not make any changes, but we know that the fuel bids came back in, and that's higher than what's there. So we'll have to make some adjustments over the next couple of months, just like we will with health insurance. But when you look at things, you're looking at about a $2 million increase of expenditures, and it's in like 4 categories: tuition, salaries, main per increase, and health insurance changes. And so that puts you into the process of saying, okay, what do you do about that? So if we need to make decisions as a community to look at what those increases will be, we know that enrollments are probably not going to significantly change between now and the fall, or we hope that there's no significant adds or decreases. And that's one of the pieces. I had a conversation with the state today, is that when you look at the funding for students, say at a hotel, that's a little different because communities have comprehensive plans. You understand that when a house sells, that there may be students that move back in, and that there's some thought that there's not a huge increases that hasn't gone through a planning board process or something, whereas communities can't plan or shouldn't expect that many new students would come in a quick amount of time on a property that wasn't designated for single-family housing or housing at all. And so that, just thinking about how that funding process comes in. When you look at the ability of where costs are in a budget, and you look at special ed tuition at TA regular tuition, and then all the salary and benefits of positions, 87% of your budget is in those numbers. And so outside of that, there's not a ton of budget that can be impacted unless you're looking in the area of salary and benefits. So when we go to our revenue page, and just to walk you through that piece again, you will see where there are places that the expenditures are on the left. On the right are our revenues, and you can see that our current expenditures is up just over $2 million at 4.36%. When we look at our revenues, we know that because of the valuation increase and the local share, they're saying to us, you should be raising $1.8 million more in education, yet you have additional local here, so that really doesn't come into play. We've looked at transportation fees, We've looked at our rents, we've looked at our tuition from Dayton, which is increased. We know that we lost $260,000 in the EPS allocation. And then currently, we are expecting, or we are budgeting $100,000 less in main care revenue. And that number may go up as we get closer, but main care, they put a hold because they've adjusted the rates. So we haven't seen what those new rates and what's come in yet because they're not paying those out at this point in time. And until I see that on paper, I want to be sure that we're making the same amount. Also, the other piece is that when you look at the amount of turnover that you have in districts or the ability to hire support staff, if you don't have the support staff there to bill for the main care costs, you can't collect the revenue. So when it's all said, we have a fund balance, as you know, through the audit piece, that we will be able to put $300,000 towards that. We have a designated fund balance, and we may want to give that a little bit of a different name of $131,000, but that's tied directly to a capital improvement of looking at new bleachers at SMS, so that in the future, as that bleacher expenditure was not there, you wouldn't have a revenue expenditure, so that would both go away. And you're looking at a situation where you have a budget piece of looking towards the taxpayers of $2.24 million. That is a combination of salary benefits, health insurance, and lost subsidy. And so that's our starting point.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Superintendent Ray on the budget presentation? Hearing no questions. Again, thank you very much for the budget presentation. Anything further, Superintendent Ray?
Don't take too long digesting all of that. Let's have conversations soon, so that we can start thinking about where we need to be or what we're comfortable with as school committee, city council, bring some stability back into knowing what we're looking at. Health insurance rates, typically we get the maximum rate at the end of this month, and then our individual rates. I will say that experience rating is high, so I'm not overly confident on that piece. And then we just got to continue to fine tune some things to make sure that fuel costs and bid things match up. Mike?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was a little bit slow on the questions. One of the challenges we're having is that 7.69% tax increase is a pretty sizable tax increase, and it's coming at a time when inflation is also hitting the taxpayer pretty hard, but wages have not at all kept up. So I'm first in line to advocate for the schools.
I do.
And believe the education of our kids is critical and one of the most important functions of municipal government. But I also know the taxpayers are suffering a lot right now. You've walked us through line by line. You've explained to us where these are coming from. I couldn't possibly ask for more information. But I am wondering, are there other levers you can pull or other sources of revenue or things that we're doing today that we can put off till tomorrow in order to ease the burden on the taxpayer a little bit? And I think those are the nature of the questions we're going to keep asking throughout the budget process.
And I think that, one of the pieces that's important for us as a group is to figure out where we need to go and then provide some direction so that we can come back with what some of those levers are. And again, sometimes pulling this lever means you've got to push that lever and things move back and forth. You will hear me to continue to say that while I do think that there may be a little bit of money in capital that we could pull out of this budget, I will continue to advise you not to pull it all, because that puts us in the same situation that we're trying to not go back into. I also, just as we talked about it a little bit last year, is that we know, or if you were at the school construction meeting that we had, we know that there is going to be some local costs to our construction projects, which will require a bond that eventually turns into a bill. And if we can think about some of the things that may be falling off the books at that time, as that bill hits, I think it's important for us as a school committee and as a council to put into some, like what is coming on or coming off the books on the city level for, say, bond payments as they reduce over time. On the school side, knowing that over the last couple of years, we've put a lot into capital improvements and if we can try to ramp that and maintain that level, we can take care of a lot of issues so that approximately $500,000 could be falling off, and then we have to figure out what the right number is to maintain. On top of knowing that we have 2 years left on the Toddle Inn lease, which by that time will be well over $300,000, plus the costs of operating a separate building. So part of our strategy may need to be figuring out what happens during the expiration of that lease and programming to think about how all of these things roll together into knowing that we're coming into a school. So I think it's important for us to think about those costs on a simple spreadsheet and start predicting where we're going, because there will be certain levers, Mike, that certainly if the council gives some direction to the school committee to say, hey, what does it look like to get to here? We will come back and present you with what that would look like in a way that would be, again, try not to harm existing employees, try not to cut programming, try to pull levers, think about revenue coming in, think about all of the pieces that we put out there, thinking about calendars, thinking about timing, thinking about transportation, all of those pieces.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I don't really have any question. I just, from my perspective, this seems to be a rather bare bones budget, and I appreciate that. I think that I can remember $3 or $4 million increases annually. So while this is an increase, I find it to be, given the circumstances, rather small increase. Additionally, I just would like to thank you for providing this in such a clear and precise manner. You did the same last year, but it's just, again, based on my experience, very appreciative of that. I have reviewed this previously, and this is the second time going through it with you, but it's just very appreciative that it comes off, you deliver it well, and so kudos to you. Thank you.
And thank you. And please understand, we recognize on our side the economics that we all live in. And I think that while there are things we would love to have, it's my belief that it doesn't do any of us any good coming in with this super high piece just to get everything all ramped up to get to where we're going to be. I wanted this to be extremely simple in the fact that here's what it is, and there's nothing else there.
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question first. How many unfilled positions have we had throughout this whole school year? I know staffing is challenging. It's under the workforce development aspect of it. Because if we, in your budget, if we're chasing 10 positions, right, and they all were $50,000, and what we do is, again, we don't even touch our current staff. We just go for what we were trying to fill. If we look at that, there's ways to grab some of those little handles where instead of hiring the 10 that you really wanted, you just hire 8. That's 100,000 savings right there. I'm not looking for an answer right now, but kind of thinking that that's just one of the little levers that doesn't affect operations today. It doesn't meet what you truly want, I get that, but it doesn't affect the operations because we're talking about the unfilled, especially those long-term unfilled positions. You can modify FTE counts, and then the budgets related to the FTEs related to that. So just one strategy, I'm not looking for an answer, but.
Correct.
That is a way to kind of drop down a bill, is if you modify your future unfilled staffing.
And one of the things is, yes, 100% unfilled positions would be something that we would have on the table. One of the things that is a little bit interesting, and I know we think of 4 years out probably as like 4 years, but that's not that far. One of the tasks that Meg and I, who are spending a lot of time on kind of the layout of the building and working through the state process, is also trying to think about unfilled positions, but also the positions that will be I don't want to say funded, but like approved by the state to be the ratios for pay. And so we're trying to do a little bit of a balancing act of saying, well, what's unfilled? What should we be looking at now that doesn't put us in a situation where you're like, okay, well, that's not going to be in the new building either. And that's not always really clear yet of what that will all look like.
Any further questions? Superintendent Ray, just following up, I know it's probably built into the ED 279 printout that you've shown through and gone through with us, especially when it's related to ELLs.
Yep.
And the increased per pupil that we're getting back as subsidy. But are we getting anything from the city of Portland or anything further from the state, as you and I discussed with Greg from the governor's office, related to our new neighbors that have moved in, and especially if that's going to continue another year? Are we getting any additional funding from the city of Portland or from the state of Maine?
So the only thing that we've been able to capture at this time is that through the Department of Education, they have something called the Purple Sheet, which is kind of other programs that are behind GPA, and they had a fund of $500,000 for communities who applied for additional funding based off this. I was able to capture a little over 40% of that figure for us, but it just comes as subsidy that would be added on to our current subsidy payments, which means that we only have an approval to spend so much money as through the budget process and how much subsidy, so it just will kind of be carryover. And that is where the conversation goes to next year, because the challenge that we face here, and it goes back to my conversation that I had with the department, even up to as early as as late as today, is that you can plan on housing stock, you can plan on growth, but communities like ours, South Portland, can't plan on hotels becoming single-family housing. And that the way that that fund is set up at the state is that while we were able to capture a little over 40% of the $500,000, the only way you could apply for that is if you had a 10% population increase in one given year, which that happened. But if things stay the same for us, there's not a chance that that 10% is going to go up again because the number's so high. And so my point to them today was, I can understand a 10% population increase if that's standard housing, but this is not standard housing, and it brings more, and it stays. And we are different here in Saco than if this same situation would have occurred to me sitting on the other side of the river. We pay a tuition payment, and we added staff. If this happened on the other side, 20-some-odd kids fitting into the high school is really not that big of a deal. Might add an additional staff member, but the cost would have been minor. And so I'm trying to really hit home the fact that it is a little different here, and that we can't, even if someone said, well, what if we add more money to the fund that's sitting there? The mechanics of the fund need to change to support what's happening.
So roughly of the 40% or 200,000, that is built into the state share EPS allocation that's on the last page under revenues. Is that what I'm?
We would get additional revenue for this year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
That brings us to what was item B, now item C, is a public hearing, Chapter 83, Cost Recovery Ordinance Revisions and Draft Fee Schedule Updates. Counselor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chapter 83, Cost Recovery, outlines the city's authority to charge applicants city staff review time and consultant fees necessary to conduct development reviews and post-approval compliance monitoring. These proposed revisions better align with Saco's current ordinance provisions, citing chapters instead of application types. Certain staff titles and definitions have been corrected, and several updates have been made to the draft ordinance and draft fee schedule to better reflect the planning department's and finance department's procedures. The economic development department's fee schedule has also been separated into its own appendix. These draft revisions are part of a larger standard operating procedures initiative, and the revisions are a result of collaborative work between the planning department and the finance department. The planning and finance departments worked collaboratively on these proposed revisions, and as such, staff from both departments recommends hearing from the public and scheduling the final reading. I move to open the public hearing for Chapter 83 Cost Recovery Ordinance revisions with accompanying fee schedule updates.
Motion's been made to open the public hearing by Counselor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Roll call to open the public hearing. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 7:47. Any member of the public wishing to speak on this item, a public hearing, Chapter 83 Cost Recovery Ordinance Revisions and Draft Fee Schedule, please come forward and be heard. With nobody seeking recognition, Counselor Gunn.
Thank you. I move to close the public hearing on Chapter 83 Cost Recovery Ordinance revisions with accompanying fee schedule updates, and further move to schedule the second and final reading for March 27th, 2023.
Motion's been made by Counselor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Johnston. Close public hearing and set final reading for March 27th. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to close the public hearing and set final reading. That brings us to what was item C, now item D, on page 22 in your packet, a public hearing for a contract zone request for 265 North Street. Counselor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ted Arcan of Arcan Properties requests a contract zone agreement with the City of Saco to establish a commercial catering kitchen and to host online events per proposed contract zone provisions. The purpose of the project is to relocate Blue Elephant Catering from its current Pepperell Square location to 265 North Street and to expand its existing operations. Mr. Arcan plans only to make interior alterations to the existing building at this time. At its January 3rd, 2023 meeting, the Planning Board found the contract zone application complete and scheduled a public hearing. At its January 17th meeting, the Planning Board heard from Mr. Arcan about the proposal and opened the public hearing. After receiving public comment, the Board closed the public hearing and voted 5-0 to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. City Council reviewed this request during new business on February 13th and completed its first reading on March 6th. I move to open the public hearing for the contract zone request for 265 North Street, which is map 54, lot 8.
Second.
Motion's been made to open the public hearing by Counselor Gunn, second by Counselor Johnston. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 7:50. there's any member of the public who would like to address the city council on this item, please come forward and be heard. For any commenters, please speak directly into the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. Al Sickard from 259 North Street in Saco. I'm a direct abutter in the rear of the property, and I just want to speak briefly in saying I'm in complete support of this project. It is a unique property, as you folks may have known when it was York County Counseling. Maine Health held it for a while as offices. It was empty for a long time in disrepair, and I believe Ted Arcan, Fausto, and the Blue Elephant catering business is the right type of business to go into this building and keep it going. It's very unique. There were 3 proposals that I was aware of that went to the planning board over the years, from a dormitory for the junior pirates who went away a year after, so that crashed and burned. A real estate office with some apartments, that crashed and burned. I don't think they got financing. And then I think it was another apartment type of proposal. So this is, I feel, the right one, and I'm in full support of this, and it is a very unique property, and these folks will handle it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for public comment on this item. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you. I move to close the public hearing and further move to schedule the second and final reading for March 27th, 2023.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn, second by Councilor Johnston, to close the public hearing and set final reading for March 27th. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to what was item D, now item E on page 24 in your packet, a second and final reading for budget amendment number 3 related to City Hall damage from a pipe burst, and that's assigned to Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. City Hall experienced significant flood damage as a result of the sub-zero temperatures in February. A claim has been filed with the city's insurance carrier, and the refund to cover costs is anticipated to be a material amount. As such, this budget amendment creates a revenue amount and offsetting transfer to the capital fund to ensure we have an account with funding to cover all necessary renovation costs. The actual claim amount may be higher or lower, and subsequent adjustments will be made as needed to the related accounts. So be it ordered that the City Council approves the second and final reading of Budget Amendment Number 3, City Hall damage. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion? With no councilor seeking recognition, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to what was item E, now item F on page 26 in your packet, a second and final reading, Budget Amendment Number 4, General Assistance Funds, assigned to Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. On May 7th, 2022, LD 910, an act to amend the general assistance laws governing reimbursement became Public Law 2022, Chapter 734. It allocates $10 million from Maine's Liquor Fund to the Department of Health and Human Services General Assistance Account. The purpose of the one-time supplemental payment is to help offset unanticipated fiscal and operational costs to the General Assistance Program during the COVID-19 pandemic. These funds may be used by municipalities to offset potential reductions to federal funding in this fiscal year generally, and related to the potential end of the U.S. declared public health emergency, as well as other unanticipated costs incurred during the pandemic. The City of Saco received $34,604.15 from this distribution. In order to ensure the funds remain available in future years and to offset potential property tax increases in fiscal year 2024, Finance and the City Clerk are recommending Council transfer these funds to a dedicated special revenue account to use to supplement general fund appropriations for general assistance in future years. Where funding is offset 70% by the state, the drawdown of this fund should be relatively slow and prevent tax increases for several years. Be it ordered that City Council approves the second and final reading of Budget Amendment Number 4, General Assistance Funds, and I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Hatch, second by Counselor Johnston. Any discussion on this item? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to what was item F, now item G on page 28 in your packet, a final reading for Chapter 4 updates assigned to Counselor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. This change to Chapter 4 simplifies some language and adds the Director of Budget and Fiscal Analysis position. The City of Saco hereby ordains and approves the second and final reading of Chapter 4 updates.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Hatch, second by Counselor Johnston, for the final reading of Chapter 4 updates. Any discussion on this item? Counselor Johnston?
Thank you. Earlier today, I did send amendment or a proposed amendment to you all. I hope you received it. It's pretty straightforward. It would begin on page 29. It's section 4-14, item E, which is actually new proposed language in this ordinance. And I'd be looking to amend by striking separate director and adding Director of Budget and Fiscal Analysis, comma, with a final confirmation of the City Council, comma.
Amendment's been made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor McPhail on the amendment. On the amendment only, any discussion? Counselor Johnston?
Just to clarify what I'm attempting to do here, I mean, currently this organizational change has already occurred, and I'm completely fine with Ms. Salas in this role and what City Administrator Kainrath has moved forward, but the way the language is right now, it just says a separate director, which is a bit ambiguous to me. And I think looking into the future for future councils and future city administrators, it would be better if we clarified what that role was. And given that the finance director under this same ordinance is confirmed by council, and we're essentially taking a former role or part of that role and creating a new position, I think that that position should equally be confirmed by council, particularly since it's dealing with probably the largest thing that council deals with, which is the budget. So that was my thinking.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? City Administrator Kainrath.
Thank you. I just want to say this looks good, and please support it. Thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment only, any further discussion on the amendment only? Roll call vote on the amendment only. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main motion now as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote on the main motion now as amended. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to approve the final reading, Chapter 4 updates. That brings us to what was item G, now item H on page 31 in your packet, a final reading, Chapter 15 updates assigned to, give me one moment here, assigned to Counselor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This change adds matching funds for grants to the list of qualified use of surplus and also updates reference codes for certain designated funds and other chapters. This also adds a reference to a recommended new fund titled Proceeds from Sale of City Property, which is addressed in the Chapter 81 revisions as updated per council feedback. The City of Saco hereby ordains and approves second and final reading of Chapter 15 updates.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on the Chapter 15 updates? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to what was item H, now item I on page 33 in your, excuse me, what was item I, now item J, page 36 in your packet of final reading, Chapter 81 updates, and assigned to Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This change directs oversight of sale of city property to economic development. This should streamline the process. Based on council feedback, surplus proceeds from sale of city property are now directed to a new special revenue fund to be expended for future development projects or as directed by council. The City of Saco hereby ordains and approves the second and final reading of Chapter 81 updates.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman, second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion on Chapter 81 updates? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item J, page 36, final reading, Chapter 175, Senior Tax Relief Updates, assigned to Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. These changes remove references to Year 1 of the program to simplify the ordinance and removes the reference to tax commitment overlay, as this program is funded by appropriation instead. The City of Saco hereby ordains and approves the second and final reading of Chapter 175, Senior Tax Relief Updates.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on the Chapter 175 Senior Tax Relief Updates? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item K, page 40 in your packet, one reading Teen Center Amendment, and that is assigned to Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over the last 3 years of trying to get 12 School Street up and running, the Park and Rec Department ran into unforeseen circumstances like COVID-19, budget increases, cost of materials rising, and increases in labor cost. With alternative spaces coming available in the near future, we believe that it is in the best interest not to move forward with renovating the 12 School Street. The City of Saco engaged the services of Port City architecture firm to evaluate the cost to upgrade the property at 12 School Street as a teen center and multi-generational facility. The cost of renovation has more than tripled from what was projected in July of 2019, $300,000 at that time, to the most recent feasibility report by Port City architecture firm, which would be over $900,000 to renovate. The cost of the project exceeds what the Recreation Advisory Board deems appropriate for the project. Therefore, city staff is recommending that council direct economic development to sell the property at 12 School Street via Chapter 81 procedures, to reappropriate the funds previously set aside for the 12 School Street project from ARPA for other projects as recommended by the city administrator in the fiscal year 2024 budget process, and expand remaining capital funds towards a smaller scale teen center. Be it ordered that the City Council direct economic development to sell the property at 12 School Street according to Chapter 81, and be it ordered that the city administrator repurpose funds from ARPA previously designated for the teen center for other capital projects to be reviewed and approved by council during the fiscal year 2024 budget planning process, and furthermore, be it ordered that existing capital funds reserved for the teen center be used for a smaller scale version of the same project. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Berman.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is disappointing for me personally. I was really passionate about this from really the moment that property went on the market. You know, but we've been with this for 3 solid years. You know, obviously, there's contributing factors we had no control over, COVID being a large part of it, inflation being the other. But I do think that at this present time, utilizing that building for what was originally envisioned just doesn't make fiscal sense. We have other things that have come into the equation that will keep the dream of a teen center alive. Obviously, we'll still have something in the future for a senior center. So, I mean, that's where I am personally, as at times as difficult it was for me to come to that realization. So I am supportive of what the Rec Advisory Committee came to their conclusion and the Park and Rec Director. However, the motion includes the sale of the property and going through that Chapter 81, which I'm not necessarily opposed to. I just feel at this particular moment in time, I'd like to amend that motion to strike that, given I think that it's a little bit premature. I would propose that council have an upcoming workshop on this item. I think that there's potential for a different adaptive reuse for that property. You know, at times during my tenure on council, I've heard about the lack of storage space. Again, I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but is that a possibility? Can the city use it for storage? Could it be utilized for office space? Another component I think is important. I think it has the potential, if we are willing to make some concessions ourselves at the council level when it comes to zoning and requirements, that property could have the potential for something that we have been talking about quite a bit recently, which is affordable housing. So I would propose that we amend that motion to strike the first paragraph, and again, I'd advocate for a workshop on this item before moving forward with Chapter 81 review. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston has made an amendment. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
Amendment's been seconded by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on the amendment? We're now changing to the amendment. Councilor Berman and Councilor Archer, I do note that you still wish to speak on the main motion. Now on the amendment, any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Archer.
I guess the argument I applies on the main will count here, so I might as well just use the time now. I'm supportive of, I looked at this more, with selling this property and something that has vision, I thought that maybe we shouldn't just do it as a one reading and get public comment on this one. So I'm actually going to support this amendment because I think it's in the same intent of where I was thinking. And I will agree, I can tell you what, I voted on this back in 2019, so I can only speak on behalf of myself. But if this was presented to be $1 million project plus the cost of the building, I don't think I would have considered this project. I'm fine with moving forward as this is the council giving a directive to the city that we're no longer interested in using as a teen center, but I do think it's premature to sell the building at this time, especially without the public input. So again, I'm supportive of, again, we gave it an honest attempt year over year to get this to be a teen center. I know I spoke with Director Summer several times requesting updates and asking for solutions, and I think everything has been exhausted. So I just don't believe we can get the vision that we wanted with this, with the original intent, especially the 2019 intent that when I first voted on this to purchase it. So I'm supportive of both the amendment and further discussions on this property. Thank you.
Councilor Purdy.
Yeah, I'm fine with the amendment. I will say that I think that would be a sin to use that property as storage. I think. Yeah, but if it could possibly be used for housing or something to that effect, then that would be a good use. I'm I'm supportive of having a discussion as to what to do with it, so, yeah, I'll support the amendment.
Thank you. On the amendment only, any further? Roll call vote on the amendment only. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
The amendment passes 7-0, and that's striking the first paragraph of the motion, starting with "Be it ordered, the City Council direct economic development," and ending School Street according to Chapter 81. Back to the main motion, now as amended. Counselor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I not only share Councilor Johnson's disappointment, but maybe even have stronger reactions. I think the teen center is an absolutely critical piece of infrastructure for our community. As a parent of teens myself, I see the mental health crisis that's arisen over the pandemic with the lack of resources and places to go for our kids, especially in the winter months, right? Places like Vacationland Bowling just no longer exist. We need safe, semi-supervised, independent spaces for them to gather, right? Places that they can be themselves, but also, right, be safe and supervised, and perhaps even have access to resources, food, mental health counseling, and other things. Thus, I think the loss of a teen center is really, really an issue for our community. I also have some questions that I just don't quite understand that aren't written here in this document. For example, we've allocated funds this year to start the project, but apparently the project wasn't started. And I'm curious about how and when those decisions were made. We also have a pretty comprehensive feasibility study attached to this packet, and I'm wondering how and when that came about, how much the feasibility study cost, when was undertaken, how the consultants were chosen, and whether there might be some benefit to having second or perhaps a third opinion on what the cost of building out the teen center would be. I know we often get multiple quotes or bids for large projects like this. It also recommends expending remaining capital funds towards a smaller scale teen center project, and I'm curious what that would look like and what the timeline would be. I think the process of a replacement or another project would go a long way towards mitigating some of my concerns about the loss of this project, but it remains an amorphous and unidentified item on the agenda. It makes me nervous. So I'm curious if there's some more information available about how we got here and what happened.
City Administrator Canrath, any further information related to
Sure.
Councilor Berman's questions?
There are some specific ideas for a new or scaled-down teen center. I'll let Ryan Summer, Parks and Rec Director, come up. He has some more in-depth knowledge on some of that, what that looks like, and also maybe the question on the feasibility study and when it commenced and the process.
Sure. To start off, thank you for allowing me to talk. To go into this type of decision on a facility that when we purchased in September of 2019, with the passion and dreams of how we were going to renovate this facility and how we were going to move it forward, was an exciting project for the Parks and Recreation Department. We were excited, we geared up, and then March of 2020, the world went upside down, and from there, we modified our life and moved in different directions, and the after the bell, the summer camps programs were modified, the numbers of teams were kind of shortened because we couldn't keep those numbers. Came to council in June or in March of 2020 and had the project defunded. Came back in 21. We put a little bit of money into it, roughly about $75,000. And then 2022, the ARPA funds. And the question you asked me is why we didn't go spend $200,000 of ARPA funds. Is because really we knew the project was going to cost us more than $200,000. So to start a project and to stop the project and to start back up in July of the following year, because that's where the money was allocated for the second half of the $400,000, we knew it wasn't feasible in that regard. The ideal for us was to start the project roughly in February, March, run the $200,000 congruently together. That gives us the $400,000 to allow us to build this project out. facility director, Don Roth, and I got together. Port City Architect does a lot of business for the city of Saco and the feasibility of it. We brought them down to do a feasibility on 12 School Street to make sure that we were somewhere in the ballpark of what we had allocated was $400,000, $85,000, what we had set aside for this project. We got the report back in January of 2018 to a sum of roughly on their paper was about $700,000, $800,000. But I can tell you through Mr. Roth's research, we had priced out what a sprinkler system would cost, which had doubled what their sprinkler system and there was going to cost. The codes had changed from 2019 to present day, but we had to put sprinklers into the rafters and into the bell tower, which was not required in 2019. The electrical, we had to shut down the day we purchased it because there was a fire hazard up on the third floor. So the electrical went. When we bought the facility, the boiler system was operational and so forth. When the first major freeze, we had burst the pipes, which then, at that point, had caused damage to. So the project kept growing, but we never finally put funds into it. Now, on a smaller scale, there's always Plan C, and there's always Plan B and Plan C. So Plan B, realistically, is to, in community center, when, again, I'll go back to, I was talking to Len before, when we purchased the facility, you had the Montessori school in 104 at the community center. You had the pre-Ks using 108 and 114. So we were out of space. I had no place to put anything. Plan B, for us moving forward, would be to do a modified team program 3 days a week, 5:30 to 8:30 at the community center and room 104, which is the biggest room I have downstairs, roughly about 800 to 900 square feet. From there, instead of going, if you build it, they will come mentality of Field of Dreams, we're going to go grassroots, and we're going to build up. And then at that point, once I can sit here and justify to you this program is going to go off, my next level is to go find a piece of property that I can rent for a year. Now, I've sat here and talked to many people regarding my plans on Burn School when the school department decides to build it. My goal is that this council and this body will decide to keep Burn School as a potential site for the first floor for the team program, the gymnasium, running that facility. Again, my scheme for you guys, the first real floor is to expand City Hall there, put nonprofits in there, and the third floor or the upstairs is to put workforce housing or someplace like that. My goal is not to stop creating a teen center. My goal is now to go different, grassroots, and show the need, but also sit here and stand on the hill that Burn School would be the best place to put it moving forward because of the park and because of the parking and because of the site where it should be.
Thank you. Councilor Berman, does that answer some of the questions you asked?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the answers. They're very clear. Answer the questions. I do have some concerns about moving the teen center to the community center. I have concerns about whether a room in that building will meet the needs of teens and provide a teen-friendly, teen-oriented space, as was the original vision for the teen center. So those are some of my concerns. But I appreciate the answers.
To answer that question, if I did it right after school at 3:15, 3:30, the answer is no. Because they'll be teamed up with kindergarten, first and second graders, and we both know 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, they don't want to hang out with those kids. By going 5:30, 7:30, a dedicated space, when the gym's available, they'll have the use of the gym. The difference between the community center and 12 School Street is they also have the green space out back to utilize. So they've got the playground, they've got the open space out back. I'll put up a couple basketball hoops there to make it more their creative space. It will be, and if I do it right, it would be a short-lived philosophy of a year or two, again, to build it up. It's not going to be their permanent stay. It would never be their permanent stay. But looking long-term, you know, the goal is to create the next space. And again, I have visions of another location that I think this would be a much better fit for. But I don't look at walking away from 12. It was a tough decision.
Thank you.
Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll say that I wasn't up on your proposal till just about now because we haven't had a chance to really talk about it, though. But it sounds pretty sound, all things being fair, on my first hearing it, though. Especially the idea if we, repurpose it to, use some of the space that we're running out of around here, though, and at the same time, if the space has the needs to actually expand the program, aspirationally. The one thing that just throws me, though, because, the devil's always in the details, is the building is now 101 years old. Well, the bones are, at least. I was there when they redid the inside of it back in the late 80s. You mentioned about a year or two to get the inside up and ready, though. I was thinking, if we're redoing the first floor and stuff, how that's configured, and I remember the library kind of being in the basement or however they had it figured back in the 80s. I see that as might take a little bit more than, than just, spit shine or whatever to get it going. I mean, realistically, most conservative estimate, though, what kind of work would that really take to really do that up to, at least to what you have in mind? Because I'm just thinking long-term, because it sounds good, but I don't want to get in a situation where, much like this teen center, and the fact that, just regular people out there trying to get a contractor, it takes them 18 months just to get someone to do their deck, let alone trying to repurpose an old school like that. What do you think is going to happen?
Mr. Ray would probably answer that question better than I. To walk into that facility tomorrow for what I would need it for, and it would be the basement floor. So it would be the gymnasium, the music room, the art room, the kitchen, the commercial kitchen, and so forth. You can pretty much walk in there. I think we use it now, so I don't think it'd be that much of a change. When I talk about the first floors where the office is, the library, and all those classrooms and so forth. If I'm going to put $1.2 million in a facility, and I'm going to straight face this, the council and the people and the citizens, I'm going to tell you put it in Burn School before I put it in 12 School Street. 12 School Street just doesn't, the financial's not there, and I can't straight face this conversation to people who are taxpayers and to myself. But you look at how many square feet are in Burn School, and we have 5 years to plan this out, or whatever the time frame is with Mr. Ray when they build a school. But once they decide to go down that road, that's when the conversations need to begin. And I hope that this conversation will take place here as well.
I'm glad you put it on the table for the public to hear, because I said there's a lot of ideas about what we could use Burns School with in the future. I've heard affordable housing thrown out. I've heard, similar to what you've said. I've heard, people turning it into apartments or something, or, business or something. But it's good to have I think the conversation needs to be had, and I wouldn't mind chatter in the community about it, though, because at the end of the day, we have to have consensus, and the last thing I want is a sound idea to get serious pushback for, no good reason, rather than just, not liking, the fear of the unknown, though, because any of these ideas, I think, would be sound, ideas for it.
And just real quick, my one concern is about Burn School and the Memorial War Field, which is out back. That field was built on LWCF funding, Land, Water, and Conservation Fund. If you build it into affordable housing apartments, my concern is the lack of parking for people to utilize that space as we move forward as well. That would be a huge concern for us on the Parks and Recreation side.
Of course. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, just in support of what Director Summers is mentioning about Burns School, again, superintendent would probably be better qualified, but I have intimate knowledge of the school with one of my child there currently and another one soon to be there next year. I would say it's largely turnkey for the purposes that Director Summers would desire right now. If you look at the list of what the church currently doesn't have, it currently doesn't have a kitchen that's outfitted to standards. The school does. You can go through that list, and it's ADA compliant at CK Burns. So maybe there's some paint needed and whatnot, but overall, I'd say, having just been in that gymnasium recently, it would seem like a really suitable place. And again, it's downtown still, so that was one of the reasons I initially liked the church, and really it's just a street or two over. So I think it's a good potential use of CK Burns in the future. Thank you.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. We've probably spent enough time talking about our dreams for teen centers, but I would just point out that some features of the School Street project were that it was a dedicated space for teens, and not just around gymnasiums, athletic events, but would also provide some space for cooking, for coffee, for gaming, both electronic gaming and board gaming, for a whole host of other activities. and that dedicated teen-centered space, that they would be involved in the programming, they'd be involved in designing it. There was some talk of putting office space there where a mental health counselor or other, social services be able to provide access throughout a wide swath of hours throughout the day were all really important features, and that I'm concerned wouldn't be replicated either in the community center temporarily or in Burns over the long term, especially if there are other offices and other people living in there. It just doesn't quite have that same feel.
So if I could, real quick, at least with the design of the community center, if that's where we're gonna go, we would utilize our teen camp for the summer to build this space out. So they would be the one developing this space. The people who utilizes it for the summer camp, they would hopefully have buy-in to what we're about to create.
Director Summer, in the meantime, is there any partnership going along with the teen center that was
There is not.
funded by the county in York County for the Saco, Old Orchard, Biddeford area?
There is not. I know they're allowed to go over there, and I hear it's a nice facility. Their age group is different than what the age group that I was obviously going to target. They go 6 to 12. That is a huge, huge difference between a 6th grader and a 12th grader. We were targeting very much a 6th grade to 9th grade. But I know the soccer kids could participate over there at this time. But the partnership, I have not had a conversation with their director or so forth. And probably somebody I will probably talk to as we move forward with what we're about to do.
I would encourage that because the county used ARPA funding
Yes.
to go forward with that program and open that center in Biddeford. So, any further questions on this item? This item has been amended, and so we are voting as amended. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Counsel Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
No.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. That brings us to item L, page 45 in your packet, one reading, Community Development Block Grant Letter of Intent Housing Assistance assigned to Counselor McPhail.
One letter of intent. The total amount of the grant award is $500,000 with a 20% match from the developer. There is no match from the municipality. The Economic Development Department will act as the grant administrator and will oversee the project to make sure all CDBG criteria is being followed and reported. Project number 1 is 439 Main Street, property conversion to residential housing, convert 7-unit business condo to a 7-unit affordable residential condo. Cost estimate, $664,753.83 by the developer Jackson Brown. Project number 2 is 642 through 644 Main Street to build 60 units of mixed-income housing. 40 units will be designated as affordable senior housing. Cost estimate is $19,100,000, and the developer is LB Development Partners. I'll abstain on reading the motion right now for discussion. We'll leave the,
So this is an action item. We first need to bring it to the floor as an action item.
what do you want? We have the blank to choose the, would you like me to put my,
So at this point, we have an item that needs to be brought to the floor, but you're choosing between 2 projects?
Correct. You can only choose one.
I can read it in, and I'm only saying number 1, not to advocate for the project, but as a place filler, because you're going to have to read something in.
That's my point.
So I'm only reading number 1 because it's number 1, but that doesn't mean I'm not putting any weight on me reading this, is what I'm trying to say. And then it will be amended to, or not, based on the outcome.
Okay, I mean, I can finish the motion
there you
putting
go.
in my choice,
There you go.
if that's, yeah. Be it ordered that the city council grant to support the submission of CDBG Housing Assistance Letter of Intent for LB Development Partners. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Counselor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Counselor Hatch. Any discussion? Let's hear from the Economic Development Director, Desjardins, first.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Desjardins. I'm the Economic Development Director. This is a first for me, so to have two projects come for just one lot of money. Hopefully, you read through the materials I did give you, explained everything out on CDBG, the purpose of the Community Development Block Grant, what the criteria is. I also have both developers here. Should council wish to get more information about their projects, I did ask them to come this evening. And from what the state tells me is I need only one project or none that council will support. For the CDBG Housing Assistance Grant, the letter of intent is due Friday, hence why I am here before you today. So this is everything kind of come together at the last minute for these developers, and I just think that's worthwhile projects to bring before you as we look into our housing crisis here in Saco. And also, if a project does not get approved, they would be able to come back next year should their project not go through needing more time. They could come back and apply for a grant for next year. But unfortunately, this is going to be very highly competitive because there's only just a certain amount of money, and this will be one of the grants that a lot of the communities will try to get because everybody's in the same boat as far as with needing housing. So I'm here to answer any questions, as well as I can bring up the developers to discuss more about their projects, should you like more information.
Thank you. 642, 644 Main Street. Is that up at the T where Ross Road intersects across the street? Yeah, I didn't see the map in the packet, but I thought I recognized those numbers. Yeah. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, this is a unique way to handle this, so I'll do my best. It looks like it's a competitive, you said it's very competitive, so there's no guarantee that either developers get this, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So
This is just a letter of intent. The letter of intent, it gets submitted on Friday,
Yes.
and then the state will say, they'll look at all the projects, and then they will send another notification saying, okay, you've met the criteria for this particular grant, so now you can submit a full application.
Yes, that was my understanding, is how I looked at it. So again, this comes down to more of a strategy and how we approach this. So I'm going to ask a couple questions. You may not know the answer, but this is all part of the strategy on who to pick because there's no guarantee. So what is in the best interest of the city is to present the project that we think is likely to get accepted by this grant.
That is correct.
So that's my premise here, and obviously open conversation here. What is the funder looking for? Are they looking for smaller development? Are they looking for smaller projects, a $600,000 project, or what I would consider a large project? Are they looking for just affordable residential condos, or are they looking for large-scale projects which are already designated as affordable senior housing? So I'm just trying to think is which one would be most likely chosen. I'm not necessarily choosing the either or, but which one's likely to get past the next step. Because anytime a local developer can get 500,000 match is good for our economy. So I'm not here to pick either one, but which one will likely, through discussion, get passed and be chosen. So it's kind of like we're picking a scholarship for one of our students to go to a different school, which we don't do that necessarily. So it is unique in this aspect. So I think we need more information, and it really comes down to is what is the funder looking for? And then which of the two projects has the highest likelihood of success? And that's kind of how my brain is going to be processing this rather than the scope. Because are both of these projects within current planning ordinances? Like, are they allowed to build both with just as is right now? And if both are yeses, then there's no differential. So we've got to find the differentials, and we've got to find which one's the most appetizing to the funder. So, and I don't have any of these answers because this is the first we've heard of this.
How the state looks at programs when they decide is based upon, it will be that LMI, and it comes right down to LMI, how many people are going to benefit from this project. They also look at the developer. Does the developer have experience in developing these types of projects? Because again, if they've worked with the state through the CDBG process, they know all of the paperwork, intense paperwork that is involved. I've been doing the CDBG grants for many years, and there is a lot of oversight to these programs. So those, again, are going to be factors within that. I mean, these projects definitely would be, eligible within their areas. But that's really what you have to decide is when you look at the project, think of it, does Saco want to be successful and say, yes, we have the CDBG grant of $500,000 for a project coming to this community, and which one do we think that meets that criteria? And that is why I gave you that sheet of the criteria to help with that decision. And like I said, both developers are here. I'm not going to speak on, their behalf on their projects. They can certainly give you more insight to the project themselves.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. I have a comment and then a question. Well, I like Councilor Archer's framework of thinking about which one is more likely to get funded. I'm also thinking about which one has the biggest benefit for our city. I think that's also a critical criteria. And these projects are of vastly different scale. One proposing 7 affordable units, and the other proposing 60 total units, with 40, I think, being designated as affordable senior housing units. And I think that's a criteria that I'm considering also. But that does lead me to my question, which is, are these affordable housing units, are they meeting kind of the standard definition of affordable housing, where it's no more than some % of the median income for the area?
That's a criteria. They have to meet within that guidelines, and they have to prove that every year that they are housing folks, because again, that's part of the process of following through and filling out the paperwork.
Yeah, thank you. And so I actually think that may speak to both criteria. We have such a need for affordable housing right now. I hear folks all the time, everybody at this dais knows about that. And that seems to be one of the criteria under the impact section of their scoring, right? The description of specific housing problems to be addressed, how the problems are identified, and how many LMI persons will be affected. And also then, of course, the benefit for the city in providing housing for those individuals. I just think those are criteria I'm looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. I was just going to touch on that, basically stating that I think what the state is looking for is we have in this list of criteria, and if you actually go on the state website, which I pulled up, this is pretty exact. And of course, one of the developers, obviously, I feel personally, that meets more of this. And if the state also looks at the locations and the properties and the municipalities themselves in their decisions, they would see, the first one that sticks out to me based on the 2 property locations is prevention and elimination of slum and blight conditions. Obviously, the 642 Main Street has been an eyesore in Saco for many years, as well as, problems with our police department. That to me stuck out, right off the top of the list. Also, when you read down to working with your long-range planning, that to me is the start of our Portland Road Corridor, a plan that we are going forward and trying to move, and that would be a huge benefit to the city and to help us work on that. The history behind the developer themselves, right to our closest neighbor at the Pines, they have a strong history in working with affordable units. So again, that's my personal 2 takes on it and why I chose that in the motion itself. And again, just based on this criteria, pretty much all of those factors to me fit into that.
Councilor Hatch, then Councilor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Having at various points in my banking career navigated through SBA 7A paperwork and working at TD Bank financing, at least a half a dozen LIHTC deals. I'm going to echo the sentiments of Tracy that the breadth and depth of experience with these kinds of programs is invaluable, because it takes just one misstep along the way to really mess things up. So I think we, in addition to the appeal of Project 2, which I would concur with everybody that have made positive comments about that, the experience of the developers, in my view, would be an extraordinary piece to focus on. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, just first to comment on process, going forward in the future, if we have these, I understand that we're right up on the deadline this week or soon thereafter. So just in the future, I'd appreciate it if we could have this before us in advance of that. Me personally, I like to digest all of it several times over before I make a decision. And I mean, I won't regurgitate what everybody else has said, but I looked at this in the packet, and it was just glaring to me that we get more bang for our buck with the one that Councilor McPhail has proposed. Not to say that Mr. Jackson's or Mr. Brown's proposal isn't additionally worthy. I'm actually intrigued by that location in particular for this use. But again, I think, we're looking at 40% or 40 units that would be affordable here versus only 7, and it's particularly in an area as far as, or an age group rather, that's important, because I think the lack of housing stock as a whole, they go hand in hand. So, for example, and I've said this several times, but if you can get senior population out of some of these 3 or 4 bedroom homes that are rampant throughout the city of Saco and into something more affordable, then we open up housing stock for new families to come in. And that has been a challenge in the city of Saco for at least the last decade. So hopefully this development would move us in that direction, even if the slightest bit. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Purdy.
I was just going to, basically everything that I was going to say has been said, so I'm not going to repeat it. So I'll be, both worthy projects, but I'll have to support what's going to give the city the most bang for the buck. So I'll be supporting the motion as read.
Councilor Gunn.
Thank you. And this is really more of a procedural question, because obviously, the larger of the two, we've spent the last month and a half dissecting former Speaker Fecto's bill and the ramifications for what it means and the tools that it finally gives us, and the fact that every community up the 95 corridor no longer has excuses not to develop based on whether their comprehensive plan or whatever the zoning it has, because the law says you have to do this now, which is great, though, because it unshackles me from the local political pressures, all of us from local political pressures of people who want to stymie development, and they're justified in many cases, but at the same time, put our money where our mouth is and find people a place to live. On that subject, a little bit of speech there, but if these folks, either one of them, because I know the deadline's pretty close, if they don't unfortunately get the grant itself, especially, I'm looking at the LD group here, 500,000 plus 20% matching. Is there, to use Ryan Summers' terminology, is there a plan B? Because all things being fair, 500 grand is a lot, but I don't think any of us are under illusions, though, that if we're going to start, doing our heavy lifting in terms of tackling housing, whether it's for unhoused, homeless, however you want to say it, it's going to cost some money. Mm-hmm. So is there a fallback that would allow them to sort of continue to look at Saco even if they weren't going to get that money? Because I don't want to see a situation, obviously, we're like, yeah, let's go for it, and then we went through this with a curling thing about 2 years ago, where they were going to take some property, and they had a big presentation. We spent half a meeting on it, and everything was great, and 9 months later, we found out after the fact, oh yeah, they just changed their mind, and it was almost a waste of time. So is there a plan B on this?
Well, like I said, both of the developers are here. And I just want to Come on up.
No pressure, just, you know.
And Jackson's here as well. Come speak in the microphone, please. Introduce yourself. Sorry, Abbott.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Thank you. My name is David Pelton. I'm with LB Development Partners. I was furiously jotting down all your questions. I drove past that property many times over the past few years and also wondered how come nobody's doing anything with 642 to 644 Main Street. And then I finally looked in the mirror and said, well, we should do something. I should do something. I guess the question at hand is the backup plan. We just finished a project that utilized CDBG funds up in Heartland, 30 units of 55 and older housing. It's complete. It's full. It's a great project. We did dot all the I's and cross all the T's, which is a very important thing. That was also a LIHTC project. So there's two parts of the LIHTC program. There's a 4% and the 9% piece, and it would take much more time than we have tonight to go into the difference. But if it's a 4% program, this extra half a million, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it can bridge the gap. It can help fill that gap. There are other ways to fill the gap. There are backup plans, including taking on more hard debt, which can be challenging. Anybody who's been in banking knows that can be extra challenging if you're not charging market rate rents. And then the other backup plan is to back off of the engineering, sort of value engineering a project and saying, well, can we use a lower quality floor? Can we use something else, which is, of course, what we would not want to do. We like to build really high quality projects. So there are some options to keep the project moving forward without the grant, but because we have a good experience already with the state and with CDBG, we feel pretty confident that they would grant us the funds. Is there another developer? Sorry. Was there another question? Okay. Thank you very much.
Would you like to hear from the other developer? Jackson?
Jackson Brown. So I think the question is my backup plan as of right now. So I've been in the mortgage business for almost 19 years now, and I'm on the front lines every day, and I can see right now it's not affordable, obviously, to purchase a home in Saco right now, and rents are ridiculous as well. So my plan was to do workforce affordability housing in my building right now with the 7 business unit condos, and right now, I can't fill it. After COVID, a lot of people working from home, remote, and it's hard to fill the whole building right now. So in the last year or two, I always thought, what can I do with this building and try to maximize the efficiency of it. And I think with the lack of housing right now, perfect plan. Transition this to residential condos right now. I guarantee they're going to be filled instantly. I mean, because I know of people myself personally, and I hear people all the time, I can't find affordable housing. And this would be affordable housing. So that's my plan right now. Backup plan, I haven't thought about that yet. I mean, it's not urgent to transition the building. I would love to do it right now. I mean, it's a lot of money to make that transition. I can, again, look to banking and get a loans for it, and on top of my mortgage already on the building. So it would be fairly expensive, especially if I'm doing workforce affordability. It's not going to help the net profit line. So, again, this would obviously would have made my decision a lot easier, and right now, my backup plan, I might just kind of hold off and see what happens, or maybe slowly transition it over the years, depending on what happens here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So, I mean, as I mentioned, I can see, merit in both these projects, and, I don't really like the idea of pitting the two versus each other, particularly where one is clearly more experienced or financially capable of doing this project just by the virtue of the size of that developer. Mr. Brown here is a local guy from my understanding. And I guess my question would be, you know, again, we sit up here and we talk about affordable housing a lot, it seems, and we don't often put our money where our mouth is. So I'm just curious, through the downtown TIF, is there potential for the city to participate in also funding this other proposal? In the past, right across the street, we did a grant for that development that is supposed to include senior housing. So I'm just curious, and again, you don't have to have an answer tonight. Would like to keep that option in the forefront. And if there's other opportunities for us as a council to participate in that, I would encourage us to move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Council Archer?
Yes, when I first presented, it was more about the process and how to think, and now I'm going to speak on where I think I'm going with this. I think, also listening to all my other counselors, I think that we should just try to go for the bigger bang for the buck, try to get this project. But I also want to encourage that we look at any type of resources, tools, mechanisms that Mr. Brown, who he is, yes, he's been in the community for many years, any tools to help him with his vision, because I do see it's all part of our infill. Well, this one's different. We're not actually creating new building, but we're repurposing for what I see in the future market, a decrease in office space, as Mr. Brown identified. But see, what tools do we have as a city that can help him? I know he can find the mortgages because that's his biz, so it's not that aspect. But what can we offer? Are there credits we can offer? Are there things like that, especially if it's to meet our lower income? It's just a great place to put units, either for their apartments. I mean, I'm not throwing out an idea. I'm just throwing out something. It's not to stick by any means, but how can we repurpose it to, one, make it revenue generating, but also benefit the city? So I'm going to move forward with the motion as is, but I definitely want to see how we can assist Mr. Brown's project as well in a different capacity.
Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. I actually had one question for Mr. Brown. Standing up, did you make reference to workforce housing? That's correct. This will be workforce housing and not open residential affordable?
It's actually workforce affordability, which actually falls under the same guidelines.
Okay.
Essentially with the LMI and everything. So, yeah, I've already talked to the city, economic planning department, everyone, and we're all on board with the workforce affordability.
Okay. But as a benefit to the city, looking at that, you would be working with a business or somebody that would be providing you the residents versus having open applications for residents of the city? Okay.
Essentially, having the workforce, you know, that's trying to work in the community. That just can't
Traveling nurses, those kinds of things, yep. Okay.
$70,000 a year, maybe even less, that rents are ridiculous.
Yep.
They have to be on the outskirts. Well, now they can be in town.
And they can, correct.
Right across from Thorne Academy.
Yep.
You know, they work there, great, they can walk to work.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted clarification on that.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Council Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item M on page 53 in your packet, one reading regarding the Walsh abatement, and that is assigned to Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Michael and Kristen Walsh are the owners of 14 Curtis Avenue and a vacant lot that abuts it on Saltaire Avenue. They're identified on tax map 011-097 and 011-098 respectively. Saltaire Avenue is a 4,792 square foot vacant lot that abuts 14 Curtis Avenue. The Curtis Avenue property is a 4,356 square foot lot with a house on it. The Walshes own both properties, and they requested by email on September 23, 2019, to have the Saltaire lot combined with the 14 Curtis Avenue lot, as they were planning to tear down the older structure on 14 Curtis Avenue and then build a new home. The combination of lots would create one lot, 14 Curtis Avenue, with a square footage of 9,148 square feet. Mistakenly, the request for a combination was not made, and the two lots remained separate until Mr. Walsh contacted the assessing office by phone in February 2023. For tax years 2020, 2021, and 2022, Walsh has received two tax bills, one for each parcel. The assessing office has corrected the 2019 error. The The Saltaire Avenue lot has been combined with the 14 Curtis Avenue lot. The combined lot is now 9,148 square feet. Several more steps need to be taken since the lot has been combined, including a supplemental bill to the Walshes payable to the city and an abatement to the owners, the Walshes. The City Council has the authority to do this according to State Statute Title 36, Chapter 105, Subchapter 8, Subsection 841, Abatement Process. The municipal officers, either upon written application filed after 1 year but within 3 years from commitment stating the grounds for the abatement, or on their own initiative within that time period, may make such reasonable abatement as they consider proper to correct any illegality, error, or irregularity in assessment. The exhibit attached provides the calculation of amounts for both the supplemental bill and the abatement request. Be it ordered that the City Council grant the abatement to Michael and Kristen Walsh for tax years 2020 through 2022 in the amount of $10,296. And further, be it ordered that the City Council approve the issuance of a supplemental bill to the Walshes for tax years 2020 to 2022 in the amount of $923. Be it ordered in second, well, should we do one at a time?
One at a time.
One at a time. I move to approve that order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman to approve the first suggested motion, and that is to write off, to abate the $10,296 and issue a supplemental bill in the amount of $923 for the tax years 2020 through 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion on the first motion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on the first motion. On the second motion, Councilor Berman.
Be it ordered that the City Council write off any interest that is accrued because of the errors referenced herein. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman and tied between Councilor Archer and Councilor Johnston for the second, and
Arm wrestle. Arm wrestle. He can have it. It's fine.
with that, any discussion on the second motion, and that is to write off any interest accrued? Seeing no questions, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 10, new business. Under new business, we have item A, which is page 56 in your packet, and it's a mobile food vending units policy brought forward by Economic Development Director Desjardins. Welcome back.
Thank you. Again, my name is Tracy Desjardins, Director of Economic Development. What you have is mobile food vending units policy. When I came here, it's been now 5 months, staff had asked me about mobile food units. Apparently, Saco didn't have any type of policy ordinance. There's also the potential as far as to bring in food trucks. So staff got together, and with the popularity of food trucks, with no city ordinance or policy dealing with mobile vending units, staff felt the need to put together a policy that would include an opportunity for mobile food vending units to operate in designated areas and to give staff the provisions needed for compliance for mobile food vending units. I also asked Director Dave Toomey with codes to be here tonight as well, so if we get in any of the code stuff, he can kind of help. So this was an effort from the Economic Development, Planning, Codes, Police, Parks and Rec, City Clerk, Water Resource Recovery, Saco Main Street, and the Harbor Master that put this together.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Councilor Johnston.
No questions, just a comment. I appreciate you bringing this forward. It's interesting that you were only here 5 months and you were able to get this, brought forward, because it's something that's been on my radar for at least 5 years. And for a variety of reasons, it didn't, move forward to council. But I would just, again, I appreciate it, and I think the framework here is pretty good. I've had quite a bit of experience of dealing with potential vendors coming to Saco. It's when it first came to my attention, realizing that we had really nothing on our books, and it was very difficult for anybody to actually operate in this type of business. I myself looked into it as a potential business and found that we really need to have more of a concrete policy or ordinance in place. So I think this is a good start to get us moving forward. I mean, I probably, as we move this along, would have some policy decisions for council to make, but, you know, as of right now, I think this is good.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. I also really appreciate these efforts. I think it's important. I think it's well-written and mostly clear. I do have a few questions about the ordinance, though, that I hope are okay. And one is about the difference between units located on public streets versus units located on public property. I see you have two kind of different sections there, and I'm curious if you can just expand upon that distinction. And it looks like the only place you talk about public streets is on Main Street between Beach and Thornton. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of the things that we were looking at, we will look for the guidance from council, is where do we want the trucks to be? So it was kind of like open for some amendments and to add some things in there. So when the committee got together, and those were some of the, that was kind of the area that kind of shined as far as that this would be a good area as far as for the things to consider within the food trucks is that you don't want them to block traffic. We didn't want them to be parked out in front of a business downtown that is operating, especially selling food. So, and the safety of others. So it was kind of trying to be, where can we be creative and put the food trucks that will be a benefit to the community, but also safety. When you get into the difference of the public to the private way, it has to do within the ordinances. So in other words, if they're going to be parked on public property, they would have to come through the city. However, if you decided that you wanted to have a food truck at your home for a party or something, you would be allowed to do that and not have to go through.
Yeah, sorry, I get that. The distinction I guess I was trying to make is you have additional requirements for units located or operated on public streets. That's page 3 of our packet.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about the liability insurance, some of the locations, some of the rules. And then on page 4, it transitions to additional requirements for units located on public property. And then there are, it looks like mostly to me, similar requirements, unless I'm missing something, but also outlines a number of different places where they might be, including the Saco Transportation Center, Camp Ellis Pier, Free Street parking lots. And I'm wondering if that's the only distinction between those two categories, is where they're located, or if there are other critical distinctions that I'm missing.
Right now, they can only be located in a business zone. Unless it's a special event, then they can be in a residential zone. So we never had special events before, but we might have special events on Main Street, or if we had Jubilee Park at a concert and we wanted them there, we allow them on places like that, which we never, so we're expanding what we have.
Good. Okay. A couple other questions. You have, it looks like the food trucks would have to depart overnight, so they're not allowed to park
Correct.
where they are overnight. But then there's also something about locations will be first come, first served on a weekly, seasonal, or annual basis. Does that mean you are assigning them particular parking spots?
That's which direction council wants to go. So anything that is done within the highlighted, and to get back as far, and, you know, Councilor Berman, as far as on, when you had said on the public streets, so this one, the idea was to take and define that and divide that up. You're going to be looking at kind of the same policies, other than we're defining it, so this is going to be the public streets. The other area is public property, and that would get where it would be down to the pier, and where it could be in, you know, a parking lot, or, so that's where the different definition is, the difference between those two. Then to answer your other question, it really was, okay, what do we want? Do we want to allow this first come, first served? That was brought up. It was brought up in regards of how many times, are we going to allow them? If we get multiple units, the idea is trying to be fair and not just let somebody come in and says, okay, I'm going to buy the whole season, and no one else is allowed to come in. So it's given that little bit of flexibility. Or is it going to be seasonal, which would be April 1st through December 1st, or on the annual basis? So again, anything within the yellow, it was kind of looking for what direction, council wanted to go. The committee and the group really wanted to hear back from council. We're going to put this rough draft together. We want to hear back from your feedback so that we can take it and do some tweaks before we get into doing the readings of it.
That's great. I appreciate that. So some thoughts, and I'm also curious about the number that we'll approve. Some thoughts that I have is an additional location, I'm just very Ward 4 centric, might be kind of in the beach area also. I think food trucks might be nice, either, in the
Where it's allowed.
in the Bayview Beach parking lot, or maybe along the roads.
That is residential zone, they're not allowed there.
So anywhere that is residential zone, they wouldn't be allowed. So it's very limited as far as Camp Ellis, basically.
Is that a requirement that we're setting, or is that a requirement somewhere else?
That's in our ordinance.
Yeah, it's a business.
It's how it's zoned.
It's a business, and it's not, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, and then I think that you can imagine that there are some times, maybe Friday nights or Saturday nights, that we might want many, for example, at Camp Ellis, and there are other times that you may not want many. And I'm just trying to think about how we think about that also.
Parking is very limited down there. So typically, in the past, we've had maybe one person for the whole season, but they never usually came back. So we didn't know if we wanted to limit it to just whole season or if you wanted to do it on a weekly basis. And one is only because parking is tight in all these parking lots, so we don't want to give up a lot at this point. If somebody wants a food truck on private property, they could have a food truck, a whole bunch of them there, but it's not on city property.
Okay.
But then they would have to meet the setback requirements.
Yep, and it has to be in a business zone. So if some property owner in a business zone wanted to set up a bunch of food trucks, they can do that.
Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You were looking for feedback, so just two brief comments. Speaking from a business perspective, given the ebb and flow of the summer season, obviously with COVID and stuff in terms of are the crowds coming back, are they not coming back, the problems of finding proper places, parking like you mentioned, I can see some validity in offering weekly things, though, because that way it doesn't tie folks that run these trucks down to an all-season thing. Because the last thing you want to do is, for example, I think it was in the Ira Jack parking lot about 4 or 5 years ago, they set up a barbecue joint during the summer, and it was tremendous. But it happened to be a fairly cold summer that year, and I went there 3 times, and each time it felt like April. And those poor people out there, I'm sure they did fine, but, I think they would have liked to have, had another spot, maybe outside the wind on Route 1. So point being, I can see weekly as being beneficial. And second of all, of course, anybody who's followed the news recently knows that food trucks have gotten so popular up on the East End of Portland that, for lack of a better term, our brothers and sisters in this Portland City Council have started to red tape that a little bit to try to ease the burden off the local neighborhoods, though, but maybe their loss, and they're kind of cutting in half the amount of food trucks can be out there, so it's not going to turn into a Cogden's. It could be our gain, though, and I obviously would encourage our economic development team to reach out and say, hey, look, you're not going to get the foot traffic, but you are going to get traffic, though, because during the day in Saco, there's only so many places you can go for lunch. And I'm sure anyone who works in an office building down Main Street, though, would love a barbecue or a taco place. So I hope that's something that we look at, because this is, one of those situations where everything's falling into place. Portland's, shall we say, over-success can be sort of our gain, and this sounds like a tremendous way to go.
Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. A couple of comments. You wanted some comments? I've got
Sure.
a few here for you, so I
Absolutely.
appreciate good work. I'm very supportive of this. I think this is a fabulous idea. Obviously, we've got to be careful on how this gets deployed. I'm just going to walk through. I got a couple of notes. I'll just spout them off to you. Under the definitions, number 1, the mobile food vending unit, I see no reference to a size limit. I don't know if that's something we want to think about, or don't want to track the trailer rig pulling in and selling food. So I don't know what a normal food truck size should be, but give that some consideration, if you would. Listening to the challenge, it seems, with the business zones, and I would be wholeheartedly in support of some activity down at Camp Ellis. Whether or not we as a council could consider some zoning amendments that might allow that to happen, I would certainly personally be willing to have that discussion, maybe in a workshop forum. I see the call for periodic inspections, and we're putting more and more inspection responsibilities on the code enforcement office. So, Dave, I think we need to be sensitive to your staffing, and as speaking as a counselor, be somewhat concerned about that. But you can inform us as to what you think that hasn't, how that can be rectified. I think we ought to have selected locations. I'm not quite sure how to do that. So we want to be, and I'm a little leery of using on-street parking only because of the safety issues. And maybe I'm overthinking it, but whether or not to me, food trucks should be in a designated area or a parking area or some sort of off-street area. But that's just me. Something to think about as well. I'd also, if we're going to do on-street, I think, and I don't know how to do this, but we ought to give some consideration to our established restaurants here in the city that, you know, you want to be cautious about bringing competition.
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know how you control that, but I think...
That's going to be in the location.
Yeah, I think we need to be respectful of our established businesses here who are also trying to make a living.
Yep.
So placement would be of interest to me. There's also, I'm looking at page 3, paragraph 4, talks about responsibilities of picking up their trash. What I would suggest is we have a deposit to go along with the licensing fee, a refundable deposit. In the event that they don't clean up, we can send somebody down there to clean up and get paid for it. So, and I don't know, I don't have a number in my head, but something that would be reasonable would be a good idea, I think. And I think that's it for me. So, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to moving this forward.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Johnston, there was I remember it's your ward, so there were some food vendor trucks parked at the transportation center
And
for a little while, and it did work out for a little while.
Well, that goes, I mean, to Councilor Hatch's point. Part of the challenge here is not having the on-street availability. So a lot of these prior food vendors were regulated by lease through the city because we had nothing in place to the train station, or down at Camp Ellis, I believe another one was. But that was it, and it was like you had limited availability to actually operate, whereas you want to be able to go where the people are. So I'm certainly, sensitive to where it's located. I mean, I've had discussions with my own family members about, the issue of, I don't want them right in front of my business, and I get that fully. But you're never going to have a successful food truck industry if you don't allow that on-street. Anybody that's been on Main Street, any night of the week after 7 p.m. knows it's dead, and this is an opportunity to make it vibrant. When I first discussed this several years ago, my thought was, you create the opportunity, and I wouldn't be surprised. I've seen it in Portland. You start out as a food truck, and you see the successful. It's a lot cheaper to operate this way, and then you open a bricks and mortar store. And so that was my real vision with this several years ago was, hey, maybe we can fill some of these storefronts by starting out this way. And so those are, again, as I said previously, these are where that policy discussion comes, where we want them. I mean, what staff has put together, I think it's good, but we as a council can certainly add other areas. I mean, just off the top of my mind, I'm thinking Water Street wouldn't be a bad location, Storer Street wouldn't be a bad location to allow that use. And there's a variety of other changes I think we could, bring about through our policies to include particularly, like I said, the beach area. I mean, I think that's vibrant and ripe for this type of use. Thank you.
So if we can get all of our comments into City Administrator
Yep.
Canrath to the Economic Development Director so that they can start putting something together. This won't be on our next agenda, but you will see it in the future as it comes forward with your recommendations and/or desires. Any last discussions, Council Archer?
Yeah, just because I'm not informed, I'll follow up with an email, that's fine. Because when I'm seeing this in vision, I'm hearing also the generators. They're going on in the back of my head. How do we mitigate the sound? I know that there's electric generators. How do other cities do this? Because I know I've been to DC, and at one of their parks on the backside of the Capitol are just like lined up. And what they did was they made electrical, they could plug in, and they probably charge it and stuff like that. And I'm not saying let's do that, but how can we limit so that there's not like 10 units all using gas generators at the train station right next to the electrical buses that we're trying to promote? I'm not here to like cause any problems by any means, but are there ways, are there measurements that we can encourage better usage of energy, or even in that section where Councilor Johnson was identifying, we allow for hookups, maybe charge them for the hookups?
You can. I mean, I've done that before as far as, if we have power sources, they would rather plug into that than have a generator going. One of the other things, too, is that when you look at the train station, it's not going to be a lot of room because it's so busy down there. And I think that the group had said we probably would allow only one. Only one food truck would be allowed down there. So that's going to be the other thing, is that we really don't have the locations where there's going to be multiple trucks. So you're probably looking at one maybe at Camp Ellis, one down the train station. And then, of course, when there are events, then all of the vendors would have to go through the event and go through that process. And, then there could be multiple lists because it's for a special event. So I really, to be honest, I don't foresee that being a problem.
Okay.
I'd also like to point out, and I know, Mayor, you had said about bringing this to, coming down at a future meeting, is that the city is getting phone calls and on this already, and our city clerk just really has nothing to kind of go by as far as, so that was kind of the goal. Our goal was to work on this throughout the winter and then be able to get it to council in the spring, so as those calls start coming in, there was a policy in place that she was able to kind of have something to guide her.
Thank you. And the second question I was going to have, are the enforcement violations, are those statutorily defined, or can they be higher?
Code enforcement officer?
Can they be what?
Are they statutorily defined, like we can't
Statutory.
be, it can't?
Statutory.
So these are the maxes, okay.
We'll never
Or
get
minimal and max.
We'll never get them.
I'm sorry?
We'll take them to court as a violation, the judges never give us that much.
Gotcha.
So again, in order for this to move forward, please get your items in for consideration, and we'll get this on the agenda as soon as possible, intermingled with all the budget items that are going to be coming forward in the next 6 weeks. Councilor Archer.
Yeah, sorry about that. Code had just made a second comment about the court, and so you're saying even if we find them, we're unlikely to be paid? Or what were you?
Basically, they can add up so quickly by the time it gets to the courts that
Okay.
they're
Where I
already-
was thinking, though, is if we had a higher fine, statutory, if we allowed, it would allow us to use that they couldn't get another permit until the fine is paid.
That we can ask counsel for, but basically, legal counsel, this is per day, and that's why it can add up pretty quickly.
Gotcha. So, again, I was trying to use the fine against future,
Right.
like how to curb behavior. That's really what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying
They wouldn't be allowed back.
Exactly.
And
Because I
that's
see
what-
that they're
that's-
allowed twice, but
that's-
how do we get them before the second violation to pay their bill?
Yeah.
Right.
So,
It's one of
Thank
those,
you.
those things. I'm sorry, Mayor, may I have a sponsor for this?
I would be happy to.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you.
Any last-minute discussion on the mobile food vending units policy? Seeing nobody's hand, moving on to item B on page 62 in your packet, a sidewalk vending policy. Again, Economic Development Director Desjardins.
Good evening. Same thing goes within the mobile food unit. During COVID, as we all know, it was an opportunity for restaurants and people to open up the doors, have seating outside on the sidewalks. And again, when I came here, one of the questions that was brought forth was, you know, it's nice that we can do this. However, we do have people that need to have that accessibility on the sidewalk. And we don't have a policy or nothing in place that we can go out and enforce this. So what we did is we took a lot of the language that was used during the COVID time as far as to allow outside dining. And this isn't just for dining, this is also for any of the merchants who want to have racks or anything else on the sidewalk, is to make sure that they are in compliance and allowing this space, and we have that accessibility for ADA, and people feel like safe on the sidewalks. So this is kind of what we put together.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think several of you have heard me speak to this in the past. I mean, I think during COVID, we were all willing to make exceptions to what, you know, the rules may be. But I can tell you that as the ward representative for the downtown, or particularly Main Street, this is by far the biggest complaint I deal with. I'm sure it is for code too. Again, I'm more than willing to allow the use, but we have a lot of people in the downtown that are challenged with mobility issues, and some of the things I've witnessed with the use of the sidewalk is a little bit more than I would say is necessary for, you know, the use that you're trying to perform on that sidewalk. So I think that what staff has put together is very good. And I will say, as I've said in the past, one of the things we need to be cognizant of is legal action. And I've had this very discussion with a resident of Ward 7 multiple times, and actually bringing, you know, a legal claim to me by their attorney, and I was able to persuade them not to challenge it, and the city would work on it. So I think that we need to move this forward. There's current or recent case law that has been, you know, gone through that process out in California, Philadelphia for ADA compliance. And so I think, you know, again, we need to support this, and again, support businesses, but also support pedestrians. Any of us that have mobility issues certainly will appreciate it. So I know it's almost 9:30 already, so I don't have too much to add on this tonight. I think, you know, as this moves forward, I can submit what I'd like to see added. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I'm going to echo sentiments of the width allowance. I know 3 feet is ADA compliant, but I think that 3 feet from the curb might work in general, but you have intrusions into our sidewalks with trees and trash cans, and sometimes that impedes people's mobility. So I just want to make, you know, maybe 3 feet's good, maybe it isn't, maybe it should be 4, I don't know, but we got to be careful, I think, of the mobility issue. And then the only other point I want to make is the one above it, it's item 6, talks about location. And the last piece of the sentence, this is page 3, top of page 3, paragraph 6. Yeah, the last sentence, it says, the conclusion of it says, it may be located adjacent to the building or near the curb. And I'm wondering if it must be located adjacent to the building, because you effectively could create a sidewalk that goes sort of inside whatever is on the sidewalk and closer to the building. And I think people prefer to walk on the curb side of the sidewalk. So I just throw that out there for consideration. Doesn't necessarily need to be changed, but I just think we ought to think about that a little bit.
Thank you, Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. One of my suggestions would actually pull that date to at least November 1st. I think December 1st is kind of pushing it for years that we may potentially get snow or some ice. People do love to be out walking in the fall, so October is always good. I probably would go, November 1st would be the latest that I would feel comfortable seeing that out.
There's no further items. Again, Council Archer.
Okay, just based on Councilor McPhail's just last statement. If we were, I definitely understand November 1st, but if we were to do December 1st, if we put some type of clause, like can be revoked by the Department of Public Works Director, or something to that knowledge.
If it snows?
Yeah, some kind of.
Weather permitting?
And then just, it's done. Once
Okay.
that happens, it can be pulled. Either or is fine with me, to be honest.
May I make a comment, please? Right now, on the ordinance, all the businesses are allowed to have outdoor sales there. So they're all allowed to do it now. There are no rules for me to enforce. This is why this is coming forward. And as your point, as far as helping out the restaurants already there, they're exempt. They cannot do outdoor sales. This will allow them. So that's why we brought this forward.
Again, if you have any other changes that you'd like to put forward, please give them to City Administrator Canrath and Economic Development Director Desjardins, and you'll see this on a future agenda, again, intertwined with budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us, that concludes the new business agenda, and then brings us to item 11, administrative update. City Administrator Canrath.
Thank you. Quick update on the upgrades to this chamber. The hybrid meeting conversion of the auditorium is nearly complete, with only acoustic echo cancellation programming remaining to do. Stone Mountain Sound, our audio-video contractor, was on site this month, completing carpentry and wiring to allow the council to meet in a hybrid format in the future. The new floor runs also clean up the room and make our equipment more reliable. This project, as you know, was funded through ARPA funds allocated by the council during the FY23 budget process. In addition, as you saw tonight, we have a new timer that's installed to increase transparency regarding any time limits during public meetings. Upcoming agendas, next week on the 27th, I'll be presenting the city's FY24 budget. We'll have Chapter 83 policy final reading, 265 North contract zone final reading, as well as hopefully bringing back the food truck and sidewalk policy we just talked about. On April 3rd, we begin our departmental budget presentations, beginning with WRRD, Police, Economic Development, City Clerk, Code Enforcement, and Parks and Rec. And as you know, the next month or 6 weeks is really dominated by the budget process, all up until our final enactment on May 8th. But please feel free to continue to give me ideas for future workshop meetings that we'll try to squeeze in, if not during budget season, immediately after. A quick staff update. I want to recognize the retirement of one longtime employee, tax collector Denise Pendleton, retired last week after over 20 years of service with the city. So we wish her a very happy retirement and thank her for all of her years here with the city. I know Denise did get a ride home in a fire truck, so that was pretty cool. So again, we thank her for her years of service, and we appreciate, obviously, her contributions to our community. Lastly, just an update on the dredge that was purchased by York County with ARPA funds. The dredge should be arriving here sometime in the summer. It's going to be stored at our public works site. The city and York County, I recently spoke with the county manager, will be drafting an MOA for this storage period, since it will be on our property, but will stay under the ownership of the county until it is transferred to the newly established dredge authority. Work is also now beginning with the input and assistance of SOS Saco Bay to develop the dredge authority and begin laying the framework for how this entity will become operational. We're going to engage legal counsel Freddie Flaherty, who has specific expertise in setting up these sorts of authorities, by drafting bylaws and to advise, obviously, on the creation of a board of directors. And once this board is seated and established, they will then, one of their first acts of business will be finding and engaging a new executive director. So that's kind of where it is now. Obviously, that's a very interesting process and uncharted waters for sure, but we are making headway. And expect some good progress going forward, and I'll keep you updated as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for City Administrator Canrath? That brings us to item 12, council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment this evening? Seeing none, that brings us to item 13. Is there a motion to enter executive session? Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Be it ordered that the City Council enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 4056C, Real Estate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor McPhail. Any discussion? Roll call to enter executive session. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 9:29. Executive session will be downstairs. And we're going to take 5. Okay, greetings and welcome back. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
So moved?
Counselor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion on exiting executive session? No discussion. Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
A motion passes 7-0 to exit executive session at 9:55. That brings us to item 14, a report from executive session. There's no report this evening. And that brings us to item 15. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Counselor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion? Roll call to adjourn. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes at 9:55, 7-0 to adjourn. Have a great evening.